Chapter 51. The Horror Mutant. As soon as these words came out, everyone woke up instantly. Seeing Chen Luo walking down from the ring, Nisha suppressed the shock in her heart, turned her head to look at the others and said, "Clean up the stage first, then put on your equipment and be ready to gather at any time." After saying this, Nisha then came to Chen Luo's side, and then the two walked towards the other side. Seeing the backs of the two people disappearing, everyone present subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. After the battle just now, at this moment, the original contempt for Chen Luo in everyone's hearts has all dissipated, and instead, there is an invisible fear that surrounds them all the time. And this also caused everyone to feel extremely depressed as soon as Chen Luo approached, as if the air had frozen. Don't even dare to breathe. Now that after Chen Luo left, the few of them actually felt lucky to survive the catastrophe. They looked at each other and were silent for a moment. Chupa, who had some doubts about Chen Luo, said with emotion, "Is this the strength of the legendary butcher? I really saw it today." Hearing this, Guangfu and Lois Hart, who were originally disdainful, didn't even have the thought of refuting this time. Seeing the miserable condition of the priest on the stage, the two couldn't help feeling chills in their hearts and then secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, they weren't the first to start provoking. Otherwise, they would be the ones lying on the ring now. Although they are very confident in their own strength, as long as they think back to Chen Luo's performance just now, in their hearts at this moment, they are filled with awe of Chen Luo. On the other side, the snowman kept silent, staring straight at Chen Luo's leaving back, not knowing what he thought of, and a fiery color gradually rose in his eyes. After Chen Luo and Nisha came to a corner, Chen Luo turned his head, looked at the expression on Nisha's face, and suddenly understood, smiled, and said, "Nisa, you don't have to be so nervous. Generally speaking, I wouldn't attack like I did just now, but that priest seems to want to use a gun to deal with me, so I can only strike hard." "With a gun?" Nisha was taken aback. Chen Luo nodded. He did not lie on this point. When he came behind the other party, the pistol on the other party's waist also came into view. Obviously, the other party was not as good as him in terms of strength. "I plan to start using technology. Although the pistol is not a threat to him, it is better to keep a whole card for himself when he is out of the house." So Chen Luo has no idea of exposing his steel body and decisively sends the opponent on the road. And after hearing Chen Luo's explanation, Nisha's complexion looked much better. A stern light flashed in her eyes, and she said coldly, "This bastard, priest, actually wants to use this method. Even if you didn't do it this time, I will take care of this scum myself. If he doesn't die, it would be an insult to our Moschino's family." Seeing the killing intent on her face, Chen Luo shook his head, stopped talking about it, and started to change the subject. "By the way, you haven't told me about the mutant yet. You should tell me about it first." Hearing this, Nisha nodded, and then began to tell Chen Luo about the mutants. Just about 2 weeks ago, in the city where the headquarters of the Nissa family was located, in order to better hide in human society, and at the same time to obtain blood as a source of food, the Moschino's family created a rescue station, gathering a large number of homeless people in the name of distributing food, and using the excuse of physical examination draw blood so that the vampires can survive. However, during an inspection 2 weeks ago, there was a sudden accident. In just one night, all the vampires stationed in a certain rescue station were completely wiped out and slaughtered. After hearing the news, as the ruler of the family, Eli immediately sent people to investigate, and it was during this investigation that they made an astonishing discovery. Near the rescue station, they found a strange creature that, like other vampires, feeds on blood. But different from other vampires, this creature is pale all over, with dark blue pupils, and the most eye-catching thing is the other's jaw like a calyx. After discovering the searchers, the other party attacked them without any hesitation. Some of them were bitten on the neck and collapsed to the ground without noticing for a while. Seeing this, the rest of the people fired at each other without even thinking about it. But what shocked them was that no matter how many times they hit each other, the other party seemed to be fine and showed no sign of death. Perhaps because the firepower was too fierce, the other party finally chose to retreat, but before the others could relax, the next moment, a horrifying scene happened. I saw the body of the investigator who had collapsed on the ground began to tremble violently, and then slowly got up under the shocked eyes of everyone. Generate. When the transformation was completed, before everyone could react, the other party seemed to lose their minds and rushed towards the others crazily. His jaw opened like a calyx, revealing the ferocious mouthparts, and bit the others fiercely. Because they were unprepared, the crowd was in chaos for a while, and they only fired a few shots sporadically, then fled quickly, and reported the incident after returning to the base camp. As a result, the news of the mutants spread, causing an uproar in an instant. For a long time, it has been the patent of vampires to infect others and transform them into their own kind. They never thought that one day there would be creatures that could infect and transform vampires, and it was such a short time. After hearing the news, everyone was terrified. Therefore, for the brand new species of mutants, they always want to find them, and then get rid of them quickly. But what disappointed them was that they didn't know where this creature usually hides. Even if everyone searched for a long time, it was difficult to find them. In addition, they didn't know what the weakness of this creature was. This added to their fear, and they did not dare to act rashly for a while. After listening to the other party's introduction, Chen Luo nodded clearly. This information is not much different from the plot he knows. It seems that the mutant this time is indeed that person. It seems that we need to talk to him as soon as possible. After confirming the other party's identity, Chen Luo immediately stopped hesitation and said immediately. Chapter 52 Mutant Base Camp. Nisa, since the other party has many of the same characteristics as vampires, maybe we can consider using the weaknesses of vampires to deal with them. Reminded by Chen Luo, a flash of understanding flashed in Nisha's eyes, and she said with some understanding, "You mean, we can try to see if sunlight or silver products can kill them?" Chen Luo nodded and said, "You can try to install some ultraviolet lamps on the firearms, and then bring some silver bullets. When these are ready, we can set off to find a mutant and try it first. After confirming the opponent's weakness, it's time to move forward." "I understand." Nissa nodded, her face excited. "Then I'll arrange it right away, at the most tomorrow, and the corresponding equipment will be assembled." "Okay, then we'll set off tomorrow night." Soon, it was time for the second night. After these 2 weeks of investigation, although the location of the other parties' lair has not been determined yet, Nisha and the others have a certain understanding of their usual haunts. The other parties seem to be eyeing the vampire. In the past 2 weeks, whenever a vampire's rescue station began to gather homeless people, this creature always appeared at the first time, and then attacked everyone. For this reason, in order to be able to see this creature as soon as possible, Nisha specially made only one rescue station open tonight, hoping to attract the other party. On both sides of several dark alleys next to the rescue station, Chen Luo and his party were lurking in a corner, waiting quietly for the other party's arrival. "Everyone, don't worry. Quietly wait in line outside. Sooner or later it will be your turn." Outside the rescue station, a turbulent crowd surrounded the gate. Hearing the shout of the young man standing in front of the gate, they asked loudly with excitement, "Hey, I heard that today's physical examination is different from before. After the examination, everyone can receive a $100 nutrition fee. Is this true?" "Yeah, I've heard about it too. Otherwise I wouldn't have come all the way here." $100. With this money, how many bottles of good wine can I buy? Haha, it seems that I will drink some in the next few days. It's so generous. I've never seen someone who gave us money for our physical examination. I think the person who opened this aid station must be a very good person. As soon as the news of the nutrition fee came out, it quickly spread around. After hearing the news, the homeless people in the surrounding area rushed towards this place one after another, and the blocked gate became more and more impenetrable. Perhaps attracted by the large crowd, finally, after several hours of waiting, Chen Luo finally found out. "Huh? There is a situation." Looking at the staggering figure walking towards this side not far away, dressed in a hooded costume, even in the dark, the pair of faint blue pupils of the other party are clearly visible. Seeing the person coming, Chen Luo immediately lifted his spirits, and after simply telling the other people through the ears, his figure flashed and he appeared in front of the other person in an instant. "Is this a mutant?" Looking at the other's pale face and the gap in the center of the other's jaw, Chen Luo touched his chin and said curiously. He was taken aback by Chen Luo's sudden appearance, but the other party quickly reacted. A fierce light flashed in his eyes, and then he roared, his jaw opened like a calyx, and he rushed towards Chen Luo. Boom! Watching the opponent's movements, the next moment, Chen Luo stretched out his right hand, grasped the opponent's throat tightly, and lifted it in the air. Chen Luo frowned, looking at the opponent's chin waving around like an octopus tentacles, feeling a little uncomfortable in his heart. It really looks disgusting. Under Chen Luo's huge amounts of strength, no matter how the opponent struggles, it will be completely useless. I saw Chen Luo holding the other party in one hand, and took out the ultraviolet lamp from his pocket with the other hand, then turned it on, and irradiated it on the other party. Pest! As if being corroded by sulfuric acid, his irradiated right hand began to melt rapidly as the mutant screamed in pain, and then turned into ashes and dissipated in the air. Just as I thought, it seems that sunshine is their weakness. Nodding in satisfaction, after confirming the thoughts in his mind, Chen Luo looked at the mutant in his hand. His heart skipped a beat, and then he flicked his wrist slightly, sending it flying. The body flew upside down for a few meters, and then fell heavily to the ground. The mutant struggled to get up, as if he knew how powerful it was. He didn't dare to attack Chen Luo again, and quickly turned and left. Watching the opponent's movements, Chen Luo smiled slightly, and then quickly followed. At Chen Luo's terrifying speed, the other party did not find him at all. After running for several minutes, finally, under Chen Luo's gaze, he opened the manhole cover under his feet, and then jumped down. Seeing this, Chen Luo stepped forward and came to the entrance of the sewer, with some thoughts in his eyes. It looks like this is here. It just so happened that other people also encountered mutants, and after telling them their weaknesses, before they had time to come, Chen Luo immediately jumped into the sewer by himself and started searching. After walking for a few minutes, suddenly, dense roars came from above Chen Luo's head. Subconsciously looking up, he saw dozens of mutants lying on top of his head, looking at him greedily, with faint blue light shining in their pupils. Seeing this scene, Chen Luo was not surprised but delighted. Since there are so many mutants gathered here, it is not far from the opponent's base camp. Aware of this, Chen Luo has no plans to communicate with the mutants above his head. After all, except for the original infected person who has consciousness, the other mutants are beasts who only know how to hunt. No self-awareness at all. Thinking of this, Chen Luo immediately had a plan in mind. His eyes were fixed, he took a deep breath, and then a dull, thunderous voice sounded, quickly spreading around. Jerry Normack, I heard that you want to avenge your father. Let's have a chat. Maybe I can help you achieve your wish. After saying this, Chen Luo immediately stood there quietly, waiting for the other party's reply. At the same time, the mutants above his head remained motionless as if they had received some orders. After a while, when Chen Luo was waiting a little impatiently, finally, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him and said in a faint voice, "What can you do for me?" It's very simple. With a smile on Chen Luo's face, he spoke slowly and made his proposal. Chapter 53, Day Trip. After a while, Chen Luo returned to the ground again and walked in the direction he came from. Back in the aisle when he came back, Chen Luo happened to meet Nisha and a group of people walking towards him. After seeing him, Nisha showed a gleam of joy on her face and hurried to his side, asking with some expectation, "Chen Luo, what's the matter? Have you found their lair?" Chen Luo shook his head slowly and said with some regret, "The other party is running too fast, and he seems to be very familiar with the terrain here. I just chased him for a while, and the other party took a chance to escape." After saying this, Chen Luo glanced at everyone and asked, "What about you? Just now I heard from you that there are also mutants passing by on your side. How is it? Did you find anything?" Hearing this, Nisha couldn't help showing a hint of annoyance on her face and said, "I have already found a mutant here, and I have already injured the opponent with ultraviolet light, but shortly after the opponent escaped, suddenly 2 more mutant came, and they ran away after killing the injured mutant. I can't catch up with them." Not only Nisha, but also everyone else's experience is the same. After the mutant was injured, suddenly other mutants rushed over, killed the injured one, and then fled. Seeing their backs leaving, everyone could only helplessly give up. Hearing the stories of several people, Chen Luo was not surprised at all. After all, he had already told the other party about this matter just now. As long as he is not a fool, he will definitely find a way to prevent them from finding his lair and guarantee the mutant army will not suffer too much loss. After all, in his plan in the future, the army of mutants will still play a big role, and if it is wasted now, the loss outweighs the gain. It seems that we can only take it slowly. Looking at the crowd, Chen Luo comforted softly, "However, there are still some gains today. At least we have mastered the opponent's weaknesses. As long as we have enough weapons, the mutants should not be able to another threat." Hearing this, Nisha nodded. Her face looked better, and then said, "Then we can only find it slowly. We will act after we find the opponent's lair." In this regard, other people have no opinion. After discussing briefly for a while, several people turned and left one after another. When the others left, only Chun and Luanisa were left here. Looking up at Chen Luo's face, Nisha's eyes flickered slightly. She thought about it, and then said with a smile, "Chen Luo, do you remember when we first met?" "Definitely." Chen Luo nodded. "I remember I treated you to a Bloody Mary, but after a few days, I regretted it." "Huh? Why is that?" Nisha was taken aback. "Oh, don't mention it." Chen Luo sighed softly and said, "I thought I would meet again later, and then asked you to buy me a drink back. I didn't expect that I would never see you again in that bar since then. I should have asked you for your contact information if I knew earlier. So you regret it because of this." Hearing this, Nisha showed a bright smile on her face, then lightly touched Chen Luo's shoulder, blinked her eyes, and said softly, "Then, it just so happens that we are free now. How about going for a drink together?" Chen Luo was stunned for a moment, with a smile on his face, nodded and said, "Then I will not be polite." Next morning, the sun rose slowly, and the warm sunlight fell on the earth, bringing a little warmth to the city. However, under the sunlight, in a huge, luxuriously decorated apartment, under the cover of a dark curtain, there is not a single ray of light that can penetrate into the apartment. In the bedroom of the apartment, Chen Luo slowly opened his eyes. Just as he was about to get up, he felt as if something was pressing on him. When he looked down, he saw an arm as clean as white jade. Turning his head to look, beside him, Nissa's charming face suddenly appeared in front of him. With a blush on her face, even though she was still sleeping, the The corners of her mouth still had a slight curvature, as if she had done something good like a dream. In addition, on the floor beside the two of them, pieces of clothing were randomly scattered everywhere. Recalling the battle last night, Chen Luo also secretly had some aftertaste. Gently raising her arms, Chen Luo put on her pajamas, came to the large balcony, looked at the tightly covered and wide curtain in front of her, with a smile on her face, and then gently pulled it away a gap. The sunlight just fell on Chen Luo's feet. Under Chen Luo's deliberate control, it did not extend to the bedroom again. Therefore, Nisha, who was also a vampire, was not affected. Closing his eyes, feeling the unstoppable weakness in his body when the sun was shining on his body, Chen Luo sighed softly. After gaining the power of Blood God, sunlight, silver products or garlic can no longer harm him, and he can walk freely in the sunlight like Blade. In a way, he's a Daywalker now too. But maybe because of integrating the body of the Ghost King, although he no longer has to worry about turning into a humanoid torch in the sun, his strength has been greatly affected. Compared with night, his strength in the daytime state, it can be said that there is no 1 in 10. Not only the various attributes of the body have been reduced to single digits, but even the power of those abilities has been greatly reduced. The speed of self-healing has been greatly degraded, and the body of steel has been sealed. It can be said that except for the ability of the source of blood, which is the same as before, the effects of other abilities have been pitifully weak. As for how to solve his own problems, although Chen Luo knew the answer, he was still helpless. If he wants to solve the hidden danger of the Ghost King's body, he must find the blue bianhua in the world of Ghost Slayer, but he has also tried to find this kind of thing in this world. But it is a pity that after he searched one after another a month later, there was still no trace of it. So in desperation, Chen Luo had no choice but to pin his hopes on the system. As long as there was an option to get the bianhua, he would definitely have no hesitation. While Chen Luo was thinking quietly, at this moment, Nisha, who had been sleeping soundly, finally woke up and slowly opened her eyes. However, when she woke up and saw the figure bathed in the sun on the balcony, her expression froze for a moment, and then she quickly realized that her face was full of shock. Chapter 54. Eli's Ambition. Chen Luo, aren't you a vampire? How could? Subconsciously straightened up, looked in Chen Luo's direction, and said with a stammering tone, "Huh? You're awake." Hearing this, Chen Luo turned around, and the sun shone on his face, shining brightly. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, and an inexplicable smile appeared. "Are you talking about this?" "Thanks to Blade's help." Hearing this, Nissa immediately reacted. A light flashed in her eyes, and said, "Could it be because of Blade's blood that you can overcome the weakness of sunlight?" Chen Luo nodded and said with some emotion, "I didn't expect that his blood could produce such a change in me. Now that I think about it, I'm really lucky. Daywalker, I also want to know what the sun looks like." Nisha's eyes are full of longing. For her who has been a vampire since she was born, facing the sun is simply an unattainable dream, can never be touched. After all, the sun is the absolute nemesis of the vampires, so if she wants to face the sun, the moment she sees the sun is probably when her life will disappear. Pulling the curtain, Chen Luo slowly came to the other side, gently stroked her head, and comforted her. "Don't worry, you can afford to wait. I promise you, sooner or later, you will be able to stand under the sun like me." Regarding the point of overcoming the sun, Chen Luo can actually do it now, as long as he sends his own blood to the other party and turns it into the Source Blood clan. But there are other reasons why he hasn't started to do it until now. He wants to wait for himself to get the blue bonaflower and eliminate his own weaknesses before starting to do it. Otherwise, if he transforms now, if it is really like what he thought, the strength of the transformed kind under the sun will be reduced by 10 times. Then by then I'm afraid it's even worse than ordinary people. What's the use of him coming with such combat power? Hearing Chen Luo's words, Nisha showed a bright smile on her face, leaned sideways into Chen Luo's arms, and nodded gently. "I trust you." Looking at the other party's eyes full of attachment and thinking of his next plan, Chen Luo couldn't help but feel a little bit of unbearable, but he quickly swept it away. "Sorry, Nissa, but I think for you, this may be the best choice." Soon, it was located somewhere in this city, underground in a building, in an underground base with huge amounts of— "What did you say?" Chen Luo, he turned out to be Daywalker. In front of a blood pool full of blood, a vampire with pale skin, bulging veins, and a bald head, who looked a little old, suddenly cheered up, with a flash of excitement in his eyes, and asked quickly, "Yes, Lord Eli." Phrase lowered his head and said respectfully, "And in front of him is the king who controls the huge vampire empire of the Northern Bear Kingdom, Eli Mosquinos. Over the years, he has been pursuing the secret of the legendary Daywalker in order to overcome the vampire's fear of the sun. Weakness. After the news of Blade reached here, he even sent several elite teams to arrest him, but because he was in another country, his forces could not penetrate on a large scale, so he was successfully countered by the other party several times. They all fled in embarrassment. Although he failed many times, he never gave up his plan to capture Blade. Originally, this time he wanted to send someone to ask for help from Blade to see if he could attract him, but he didn't want Chen Luo to be bumped into by Nisha. And he also asked him for help. When he knew that it was Chen Luo who came, Eli was disappointed for a long time. But he never expected that Chen Luo would also be unafraid of the sun and had the same Daywalker traits as Blade. After hearing the news, Eli was pleasantly surprised. Can't hide the excitement in his eyes. He quickly looked at Phrase and said, "Freeze! I order you to bring Chen Luo here to me no matter what. As long as he can be caught, by studying his blood, we will definitely find out the Daywalker's secret. By that time, the sun will no longer be our hindrance."
Yes.
Hearing this, Fraser felt a little excitement in his heart, but then he seemed to have thought of something, calmed down instantly, and hurriedly said, "But, Master Eli, regarding those mutants, it has not been completely cleared. If the other party is captured now, how should we deal with those mutants?" "A mutant?" Eli's face froze slightly, and the cold light in his eyes flickered, and then he calmed down quickly and said lightly, "Haven't you guys already found the weakness of those mutants? Since in this way, the mutant is nothing to worry about. I believe you can handle it too. However, to be able to find the weakness of the mutant, we still have to thank Chen Luo for his dedication. He has helped us a lot. Then as a thank you, after arresting the other party, give him a less painful death law." Eli looked ahead with a smile on his face, his eyes full of anticipation, as if he was already thinking about the scene where he successfully stood in the sun after studying Chen Luo's blood. When he was imagining a bright future, he never imagined what the future would be waiting for them. "Oh, is Nisha's father going to invite me to be a guest?" Looking at the respectful Phrase in front of him, Chen Luo raised an unknown smile. "Yes, Lord Eli wants to see who is able to capture his daughter's heart. Mr. Chen Luo, Lord Eli has been looking forward to you for a long time." "Really? Father, does he really think so?" Hearing this, Nisha's eyes lit up, and she turned to look at Chen Luo expectantly. Seeing this, what else could Chen Luo say? He nodded with a smile and agreed. "Okay then, I just want to meet. What does the king of this country look like?" Seeing Chen Luo's actions, the light in Fraser's eyes flickered, and then he quickly whispered, "Mr. Chen Luo, please follow me." Then, he immediately turned around and began to lead the way. The three of them got into the car and drove all the way. After a while, as the door opened, the three of them finally arrived at their destination. Chapter 55. Chen Luo got out of the car slowly, looked at the incomparably huge amounts of steel gate in front of him, and said with some emotion, "So this is your base camp? It's really hidden. After all, we also have ghost hunters here. In order to guard against them, the base needs to be built more concealed." Phrase stepped forward, came to the password next to him, and replied while entering the password. Hearing this explanation, Chen Luo nodded and said no more. Soon, after entering the password, the door in front of the three of them opened slowly. After the three of them entered the door, they looked at another door in front of them. Chen Luo was silent for a moment, and then said, "It seems that Mr. Eli is really cautious. The protection is so thoughtful." Although he knew the plot a long time ago, when he actually saw the appearance of the base, he still couldn't help feeling a little bit emotional in his heart. The other party's character of fear of death really opened his eyes. Nisha and the two on the side were a little embarrassed, but they couldn't say much. They just quickened their pace again and hurried forward. After a while, when the three of them passed through 5 gates, they finally formally stepped into the base. Led by Fraser, Chen Luo and Chen Luo came to a metal-colored gate, as if they had sensed something. Suddenly, the gate slowly opened. "Mr. Chen Luo, please follow me." After all, Phrase took the lead and stepped into the gate. Chen Luo didn't do much hesitation either, and followed closely behind. When he came to the room, what caught his eyes was an extremely wide metal secret room, which was divided into upper and lower floors. Huge amounts of the blood pool stood tall, and in the blood pool, there was a very old-looking figure with its back facing them. "Master Eli, Mr. Chen Luo is here." Hearing this, the figure paused, and a hoarse voice sounded. "Understood. You go out first."
Yes.
After finishing speaking, Phrase slowly retreated towards the gate. Then, the old figure turned around slowly and walked towards Chen Luo step by step. "Father." Nissa came to the other side and greeted him respectfully. "Nissa." Eli patted his daughter's head. His old face was full of gratified smiles. "You really have a good eye. I'm very satisfied." Nisha naturally understood what the other party said, and looked at Chen Luo next to her with a rosy face, then lowered her head slightly and said nothing. Seeing this, Eli smiled, then slowly came to Chen Luo's side and said, "Mr. Chen Luo, I have really troubled you these days. If it weren't for you, we don't know how to deal with those mutants now." After saying this, Eli looked at Chen Luo with a smile on his face. "Since there is no need to worry about the mutant problem, it's time for us to talk about the next thing. After all, I'm very interested in Daywalker's secret." As soon as these words came out, Chen Luo sneered in his heart. This old guy can't bear it so soon? Although he already had guesses in his mind, Chen Luo still pretended to look at the other party with a puzzled look on his face and asked, Mr. Eli, what do you mean? While the two were talking, Eli returned to Nisha's side and then lightly clapped his hands. Come out. The next moment, the door on the second floor opened instantly, and then hundreds of heavily armed figures rushed out from the door, stood around the corridor on the second floor, raised their guns, and aimed them in Chen Luo's direction. And among the hundreds of figures, the members of the Blood Alliance team headed by Fraser stood out. Seeing this scene, Nisha's face changed drastically. She looked at her father beside her in disbelief and said in panic, Father, what are you going to do? Chen Luo, isn't he our distinguished guest? Could it be that the reason why you invited him here is to arrest him? That's right. Eli turned to look at his daughter. His face instantly turned indifferent. Nisa, you should understand how important the ability to be immune to the sun's influence on us vampires is to us. I have sent people to capture Blade several times before, but unfortunately the other party is too far away from us, and they failed every time. But this time is different. Eli looked at Chen Luo greedily and said in a low voice, Now that there is a ready-made Daywalker delivered to me, how can I have any reason to give up? As long as I can capture him and study every organ in his body, even every bone, I will learn the secrets of Daywalker sooner or later. At that time, I will be able to create an army of vampires who are not afraid of the sun. With such an army, whether it is a mutant or something else, it will no longer be my opponent, and I will build an unprecedented vampire empire in this world. The whole world will surrender at our feet. After all, Eli could no longer restrain the excitement in his heart and let out a piercing laugh like a night owl. Nisa, my good daughter, I still want to thank you this time. If it weren't for you, he wouldn't have agreed to come here so easily. I've raised you for so many years, and now I've finally seen the rewards. Hearing this, Nisha's heart was ashamed immediately. Her face was terribly pale, as if she had been hit by some serious blow. She stood aside in a daze, motionless. However, at this moment, Chen Luo, who had been silent before, finally took action. Looking at Eli, who was laughing endlessly in front of him, he sneered and said, You can even use your own children like this? It seems that you are really a good father. Eli. Afterwards, Chen Luo took out a ring with a special imprint on the ring's surface from his pocket, threw it at the opponent's feet, and said slowly, I think you don't know this ring, do you? Jerry Normark, the original mutant that you transformed into what it is now. Even your own son can do such a thing. I really have to say admiration. Seeing the familiar ring under his feet, Eli stopped laughing, and his face instantly became extremely gloomy. He raised his head, looked at Chen Luo and asked, Where did you get this ring from? Seeing Chen Luo's smile in front of him, for some reason, he suddenly felt uneasy. Sure enough, the next moment, when he heard what Chen Luo said, a trace of panic finally flashed uncontrollably in his eyes. Chapter 56, General Attack, Mutants Arrive. I think you already have the answer in your heart? Looking at the other party, Chen Luo said with a half-smile on his face, This ring was definitely handed over to me by him, and after handing it over to me, he specifically told me to send it to his dear father. Now it seems that I should have fulfilled his entrustment, right? Hearing this, there was an uncontrollable panic on Eli's face, but then he seemed to have thought of something, calmed down quickly, and said with a sneer, So what? As my son, being able to contribute a little to my experiment is the only role he can play in his pathetic life. For the glory of the future of the entire vampire, his sacrifice is worth it. Seeing this scene, Nisha at the side suddenly woke up from her bewilderment and looked at the other party in disbelief. What? Could it be that those mutants outside are also your masterpiece? He but your son. How can you bear to do this? For my great cause, there is nothing that cannot be sacrificed. Even you, my daughter. Facing Nisha's questioning, Eli looked at him indifferently. His eyes were cold and cruel. Staring blankly at her father whom she had known from before, Nisha felt ashamed. With a sad smile on her face, she slowly came to Chen Luo's side and said softly, Father, I know I can't change your decision. Since you want to kill Chen Luo, then take my life too. After all, Nisha turned her head to look at Chen Luo, her eyes full of apology, and said, I'm really sorry, Chen Luo, for letting you participate in such a thing. If I had known earlier, maybe I was in Las Vegas. I will not invite you to help. Seeing Nisha's choice, Chen Luo's eyes softened slightly. He sighed softly, and then comforted him softly. Don't say sorry to me. You don't owe me anything. I chose to come here because of it is my own will. After a pause, Chen Luo turned to look at Eli, with a smile on his face and said, Besides, if I hadn't come here, how would I know the location of this base? Hearing this, Eli's pupil shrank instantly, and he subconsciously asked, What do you mean? Chen Luo smiled, pointed to the ring at the other party's feet, and said, Thanks to it, Norma must have received the location of this base now. What did you say? Hearing this, Eli's expression changed dramatically. Just as Chen Luo and his group were speaking, on the outskirts of this base, unconsciously, in the dark night, a large group of humanoid creatures had already surrounded the place. Their pale skin, blue pupils, and the jawline extending to their throats all showed their identities. At this moment, there are thousands of mutants gathered here, and at the front of these mutants is a tall and slender young man wearing a hooded costume with a face full of hatred. And this man was transformed by his biological father, and finally became the original mutant Norma. Looking at the base in front of her, Norma's eyes were full of excitement that couldn't be concealed. Her eyes were flickering with blue flames, and her voice was like 9 hells, which made people shudder. Father, here I come. At this moment, the huge iron gate in front of everyone was closed tightly together. Norma knew that it would be a waste of effort to break in from here. Therefore, after some thought, he slowly turned his gaze to the building above the base. Building. Knowing the habits of vampires, he knows that this building is also the lair of vampires. Although Eli usually does not come here, there must be a secret passage between here and the underground base, so as to ensure that both parties can enter and exit. Thinking of this, Norma immediately made a decision and roared behind her, pointing at the building behind her, and shouted, "Go! Destroy everything here! Don't let anyone go!" Roar! All the mutants behind them raised their heads to the sky and screamed loudly, then ran towards the building in front without looking back. Under the all-out running of thousands of mutants, even though the guards in the building in front of them quickly found them, they were rushed by these mutants before they could stop them, and they were torn into countless pieces in an instant. Because it has not been 2 days since they knew the weaknesses of these mutants, except for some of Eli's elite troops equipped with ultraviolet guns, others have no time to assemble them. Without the weapons to restrain the mutants in their hands, everyone has nothing to do with these mutants. They can only watch the other party open that terrifying mouth and rush towards them. Ah, don't come here. Help. Someone help me. Damn mutants. Go to hell with me. Hurry up and inform Master Eli. Mutants are coming. Wails, roars, and roars are intertwined to form a cruel and gorgeous symphony. Countless mutants are like ferocious and brutal beasts, madly rushing towards every life they see. Remnants of limbs and broken arms were flying in front of her eyes, blood splattered everywhere, rendering the surrounding buildings bright red. Looking at the scene in front of her, the corners of Norma's mouth raised slightly, and the blue flames in her eyes instantly became more vigorous. Ignoring the bloody massacre of all the mutants in the building, Norma focused on looking for the entrance to the base. Soon, in an inconspicuous corner, he finally found something. Please, I'll tell you everything you want to know. Don't kill me. In Norma's hands, he was holding a tall and strong vampire in the air. At this moment, his eyes were full of fear, and he kept begging for mercy, hoping that the other party would spare his life. Click. After asking the answer she wanted, Norma broke the opponent's neck instantly without any hesitation, threw the opponent on the ground casually, and then rushed at full speed in the direction the opponent pointed. Running wildly all the way, at this moment on his way forward, all life has been slaughtered by mutants, and no one can stop his progress, so it didn't take long for him to reach his destination successfully. Standing firm, he opened the door in front of him, and behind this door, an elevator suddenly appeared in front of him. Looking at the elevator in front of her, Norma's face instantly became extremely excited. She licked her lips subconsciously, and Senhen's voice slowly echoed around. Wait for me, father. We shall meet again soon. Chapter 57. The Feast of Killing. Take the elevator all the way down and soon. The elevator came to the bottom floor smoothly. At the same time, the periphery of the elevator was already surrounded by dozens of elite vampire teams armed with the latest ultraviolet guns in their hands. As early as the first time the building was besieged by a group of mutants, someone on the upper floor passed on the news here. Therefore, after getting the news early, the base on the lower floor immediately began to prepare. But because Norma's attack was too sudden, they didn't have enough time to prepare, so it was their best effort to mobilize this team in such a short time. But even so, they are very confident. Although compared to the thousands of mutants, the number of dozens of people in this area seems so insignificant, but they also have their own advantages. That is, the only passage they are responsible for guarding is the elevator in front of them. Because the number that the elevator can hold is also limited, they don't have to worry about all the mutants above them swarming down. At most, they only need to face dozens of mutants at one time. Such a quantity, with the weapons in their hands, is completely enough to deal with it. However, when everyone was confidently waiting for the mutant to arrive, the moment the elevator door opened, the situation suddenly exceeded everyone's expectations. Roar! There was a beast-like roar, and immediately afterward, a steady stream of constantly mutants poured out from the elevator entrance, madly rushing towards the surrounding people. Even if this team reacted quickly and immediately turned on the ultraviolet light to meet the enemy, but after eliminating dozens of mutants, they were approached by the mutants that continued to pour out, opened their ferocious mouths like calyx, and turned towards the enemy. Everyone bit down. No. Go away, damn mutant. Get the hell out of here. Damn it, how come there are so many of them? We guessed wrong. I saw it. Those mutants climbed out of the elevator. They came down the cable connecting the elevator. What? It turned out to be like this. We are doomed. No one can save us. Soon, the desperate cries of the crowd gradually began to weaken, and then became silent. But not long after, the body trembled, and then, the team that had already lost their lives opened their eyes again. But their appearance at the moment was no different from those mutants. They had completely lost their sanity, and their blue pupils were constantly patrolling around. Soon, as if they had found some prey, they roared and ran towards the distance. Driven by bloodthirsty instincts, countless mutants violently broke through the blockade in front of them, and then scattered towards the base in all directions, wantonly slaughtering everything in front of them. Although this base is the base camp of Eli's vampire empire, there are thousands of vampires stationed in this base. With the hard resistance of these people, they were able to stalemate with a group of mutants for a while. But because they don't have weapons like ultraviolet guns that can cause damage to mutants, even if they have an advantage in numbers, they will gradually lose to the attacks of these mutants, and faintly retreat the trend of, damn it, attack the heads of these mutants for me. As long as their heads are chopped off, they still won't survive. Someone yelled in the crowd. But even if there are other methods that can kill mutants, how many people can do it with this strength? After all, doing so meant fighting the opponent hand-to-hand. But those mutants were not afraid of death, and launched attacks frantically. Some people were bitten right away without noticing it. Under the terrifying infectious power of mutants, a vampire version of Resident Evil is being staged. In just a few minutes, the bitten vampire quickly transformed into a mutant. His skin gradually turned pale. His pupils glowed with a faint blue light. His sanity had completely disappeared. He roared and turned his head towards his comrades behind him, launched an attack. No. Get out of here. I was bitten. It's over. I'm dead. Let me go. Don't kill me. The same scene reappeared. Under the mutants' risk-taking style of play, coupled with their terrifying contagious power, in less than 20 minutes, the people who were still resisting began to collapse in an instant, with faces full of blood, scattered and fled in fear. Countless people screamed and wanted to escape from the base, but the gates in front of them that were originally used to resist a mutant blocked their only way of life. Facing the pursuit of the mutants behind them, they didn't even have time to open the gate. No, he was immediately surrounded by countless mutants, and then he was bitten into pieces. Not paying much attention to the hell-like scene around her, Norma kept searching for something. Her face was full of unconcealable ferocity, and she shouted loudly, "Father, where are you? I'm here to find you." At the same time, looking at Chen Luo in front of him, Eli was in shock, when suddenly, the door in the middle of the second floor opened, and then someone ran in anxiously, shouting, "Master Eli, it's too bad. Those mutants have already arrived at the base. Our people are almost unstoppable, and this place is about to fall." Hearing this, Eli's pupils constricted instantly, and he looked at Chen Luo firmly. "So this is your plan. Use yourself as a bait, and then expose the location of the base to Norma to attract him over. Why the hell are you doing this? What good does it do you? Do you think Norma will let you go because of this? Stop dreaming. He hates all vampires now, and he is just using you. Even if you helped him before, he would still kill you." Chen Luo looked at the other party with extremely indifferent eyes, and said calmly, "Are you done? Then wait for him to come over. Even if he wants to attack me, you must be the one who dies first." "Damn it, you lunatic." Eli stepped back quickly, and said with an extremely gloomy face, "But do you think I can do nothing? To tell you the truth, there is a secret exit in this base. Norma, he will definitely not be able to find it there. As long as I can catch you and study your secrets, then I have nothing to be afraid of." Chapter 58, The Siege. After saying this, Eli immediately ordered, "Phrase, bring someone to catch me alive. As long as you don't kill him, the rest is up to you." "Yes, Master Eli." Phrase nodded, then looked to the side, and said in a deep voice, "Blood Alliance team, get out." Hearing this, several people lifted their spirits and took a step subconsciously. Lois Hart, Chuppa, Light Axe, Villain, Snowman, you all come with me, and everyone else stay put. "Yes." Afterwards, apart from Phrase and his group who were walking downward, nearly 100 other elite vampires held submachine guns in their hands and aimed at Chen Luo's direction. Coming in front of Chen Luo, Fraser's face was full of solemnity. After all, he had seen with his own eyes before how the other party killed a priest who was not weak in the Blood Alliance team, and tore off the other party's head. Even if it was the strongest of Eli's subordinates, he did not have the confidence to be able to do so. Do it. If he consciously fights alone, he is definitely not the opponent's opponent. So after receiving Eli's order to capture him alive, he immediately prepared to take the other members of the Blood Alliance team together to start action. In his mind, no matter how strong Chen Luo is, he will definitely not be an opponent in the face of the siege of the 6 of them. I'm really sorry, Mr. Chen Luo. Since it's Lord Eli's order, we have no reason to refuse. Just come with us. At least, you can still guarantee your safety. Before Chen Luo could speak, beside him, Nisha asked angrily, Phrase, did you know about your father's plan a long time ago? By bringing Chen Luo to the base, have you already prepared to attack Chen Luo? In this regard, Fratz was silent. Sorry, Miss Nissa. Although she didn't answer directly, Nissa had already understood what the other party meant. Her heart was filled with anger, and her eyes were flickering with fire. Since you are going to do something to Chen Luo, then start with me. Before he finished speaking, suddenly, Chen Luo shot out instantly. His palm turned into a knife, and gently slashed towards the opponent's neck. For a split second, Nisha rolled her eyes and passed out immediately. Pick it up gently, then come to a corner beside it, and then put it on the ground. Don't worry, it will be over when you wake up. After finishing speaking, Chen Luo got up and returned to his original position, looked at the group of people in front of him, waved his hand, and said indifferently, Then come on. Since you are so fearless of death, I will give you a ride. Hearing this, Guang Fu, who had the hottest personality, turned red in an instant. His eyes widened, and he said angrily, Bastard, what are you talking about? Do you really think you are a god? Can you beat us all? At this moment, Lois Hart on the side suddenly sneered, and slowly pulled out a sharp military stab about 1 foot long from behind. 2 blood grooves were engraved on both sides of the blade, and the cold light shone, making people shudder. Chen Luo, you should have heard it just now, right? As long as we don't kill you, we can do anything. It seems that we can finally have a good time. Although Chen Luo has been unhappy for a long time, he understands that if he fights alone, he will definitely not be the opponent of the opponent. Even if Lois Hart thinks he is better than the pastor, in Chen Luo's hands, I'm afraid it's just a few extra tricks. But now it's different. There are a total of 6 people on their side, and when it comes to skills, they are also some of the best among all the vampires under Eli. But when it comes to single-handedly fighting ability, each of them has the ability to fight against 10 or even more. With a lot of strength, coupled with the tacit cooperation honed for many years between them, if they act together, it is not a problem to be 1 against 100. With such strength, he doesn't believe that the opponent can resist it. Thinking of this, the smile on his face became more ferocious. So, at the next moment, a few people stepped forward in an instant and surrounded Chen Luo. Then, Guang Xue took the lead and roared, Go to hell. Then, he quickly pulled out the double-sided axe behind his back, raised it high, and then slashed down in the direction of Chen Luo. He had no intention of probing. Knowing that Chen Luo's strength was terrifying, he had already used all his strength as soon as he made a move. The blade of the axe broke through the air in front of him in an instant, and faintly let out low noises. Under the full force of the light axe, the force attached to the blade of the axe was already as heavy as 1,000 caddies. This kind of force was enough to split a person in half instantly. But it was a pity that Chen Luo was not within the range of these people. Although the opponent's attack was good, it was only good, and it was far from enough to cause damage to him. Stretching out his right hand, just when the blade of the axe was about to approach, he gently squeezed it calmly and firmly held it in his hand. The axe is good. After I kill you, it can be used to peel apples for me. Chen Luo smiled and said with great interest, How can this be? Looking at the scene in front of him, Guang Fu's eyes widened instantly with an expression of disbelief. The veins in his arms were bulging, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remove the axe from Chen Luo's palm. Seeing Guang Xue's sweaty face, Phrase shouted solemnly, His strength is not something we can handle alone. Let's go together. As he spoke, he raised the long knife in his hand, which was similar in height to the blade weapon, and slashed at Chen Luo diagonally. His actions were like a fuse. In the next moment, the other people also reacted immediately, and they all made a move. Long whips, knuckles, daggers, and even Snowman's eye-catching nunchucks all greeted him at the same time. Facing the siege of several people, Chen Luo didn't intend to resist forcefully. When he moved his feet, his body instantly turned into an afterimage and disappeared before everyone's eyes. Before a few people could react, the next moment, a shrill scream came, and they subconsciously turned their heads to look, and the eyes of several people instantly widened. Plop! The tall body collapsed to the ground, and Chen Luo stood beside him with a smile on his face. He did not know when he was holding the dead head of the light axe on his gloved right hand. The long spine was connected to the ground, and the blood instantly dyed the ground under Chen Luo's feet bright red. Throwing his head aside casually, Chen Luo turned around, A smile slowly appeared on his blood-stained face and said softly, "The first one has been solved. So, who will be next?" A demon-like whisper sounded, and seeing the corpse at Chen Luo's feet, several people shuddered in unison, their hearts full of fear. P.S. It will be on the shelves around 7 p.m. Whether this book can continue to be written depends on everyone's support. Ask for a subscription here. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 59, Man of Steel, shocking the audience. Deathly silence. In just an instant, the light axe died tragically in front of everyone. Even if several people launched a siege at the same time, they couldn't stop the opponent's footsteps at all. Looking at the head in Chen Luo's hand, for a moment, everyone's eyes were filled with fear. Fill up. Even Wei Lian, who is the partner of Light Axe, has no intention of avenging her at this moment. She looks at Chen Luo with fear in her eyes, her body trembles slightly, and she wants to escape uncontrollably. I was so scared that I couldn't move at all. Damn, his speed is too fast. We can't be opponents, run away? At this time, what everyone didn't expect was that Lois Hart, who had the most aggressive personality, was the first to retreat, turned around and ran towards the second floor behind. The others woke up like a dream. Fraser and Villian started to run away without looking back, while the remaining Snowman and Chupa reacted a bit slower, just about to turn around. But the next moment, Chen Luo seemed to appear in front of the two of them in a teleportation. Seeing this, a sharp light flashed in Snowman's eyes, and he swung his nunchucks at Chen Luo, while shouting loudly, "Koopa, you go first. I'll stop him." Hearing this, Chupa's eyes instantly became extremely struggling, but it only lasted for a moment, and then was replaced by a trace of ruthlessness. Waving his fists and joining the battle group, his face was full of ferocious roar. "Bastard, do you want me to leave you and run away? Die together." He moved his body calmly, dodging the attack of the two people. Hearing this, Chen Luo's eyes flashed with admiration, and he said slowly, "You have the courage. Congratulations, you have obtained the qualification to live." A trace of doubt flashed in the eyes of the two of them, but before they could speak, Chen Luo moved his feet, and his speed skyrocketed again. The next moment, he appeared behind the two of them. The knife went down with two hands. The two of them rolled their eyes and fell unconscious on the ground instantly. After dealing with these two people, Chen Luo slowly turned around and looked forward. After being blocked by the two, the three of Frazee had fled to the second floor at this moment, tightly surrounding Eli to protect his safety. "Master Eli, Chen Luo's strength is completely beyond our imagination. We can't see his speed clearly, and it is too difficult to capture him alive. What should we do now?" Facing Frazee's question, Eli just thought for a while, and immediately had an answer. "Since there is no way to capture him alive, let's kill him. Although the value is not as high as that of a living body, even a corpse should be able to research something." After saying this, he seemed to think of something again. A trace of uneasiness flashed in his eyes, and he said hastily, "Hurry up. We are running out of time. We must leave with the corpse as soon as possible." "Yes," Fraze replied in a deep voice. Then, he turned around, holding the gun in his hand, and pointed it directly at Chen Luo. Beside him, Lois Hart and Villian, who had just escaped successfully, were also on the list. "Bastard. So what about the speed? I don't believe that you can still dodge bullets." There was a sneer on his face. Lois Hart looked down with complacency in his eyes, as if he had seen Chen Luo's next tragedy. "I will avenge Light Axe, you demon." Finally regaining consciousness, Wei Lian gritted her teeth tightly. Her lips were bitten and she didn't feel it. Her hands tightly gripped the gun in her hand. Her knuckles were faintly whitish due to too much force. Looking around, looking at the guns in the hands of hundreds of people above, no matter how confident he is in his own speed, Chen Luo doesn't think he can dodge all the bullets unless his speed can reach the level of Quicksilver. Maybe it is possible. "It seems that I can't keep this dress." Looking down at the clothes on his body, this is what Nisha just bought for him today. Thinking that it will be damaged soon, Chen Luo shook his head, his face full of pity. "Prepare. Start shooting." Following Fraze's order, the next moment, everyone subconsciously pulled the trigger. Da-da-da. Numerous bright yellow flames emerged from the muzzle of the gun, and immediately afterward, a constant stream of bullets poured out, hitting Chen Luo in the direction below. Among the crowd, Lois Hart pulled the trigger and shouted with a ferocious expression on his face. "Die, Chen Luo, die for me. What kind of butcher shit? Go to hell for me. Chen Luo, you devil. I want you to be buried with Light Axe." Countless bullets hit Chen Luo's body, just when everyone thought that Chen Luo would be killed instantly by countless bullets, but the next moment, when everyone saw the changes in Chen Luo's body below, they were all in unison. His countenance changed. Countless bullets poured down, trapping Chen Luo in an instant. In just an instant, Chen Luo's delicate-looking outfit suddenly became tattered, and through the countless holes, one could faintly see the strong body inside that was like a knife-carved body. When the bullet touched Chen Luo's muscle, as everyone expected, the scene of the bullet piercing through Chen Luo's body did not appear. Instead, there were only countless crisp sounds, followed by countless bullets falling feebly to the ground. As if it had been hit on a super hard alloy steel plate, not only did the bullet not penetrate the flesh and blood, but it shrank into a ball like a flattened soda can in an instant, without being able to penetrate an inch. In front of the ability of Chen Luo's steel body, this level of firepower can no longer cause him the slightest harm. Seeing such a scene, everyone's eyes flashed with horror. How is this possible? Li Luzhao, is this guy still human? Monster. Soon. Damn it, bullets don't even work on him? Lois Hart's face was extremely ugly, and a trace of fear flashed uncontrollably in his eyes. He tore off the broken clothes casually, revealing his perfect figure like a sculpture. His tall and strong body is like a god in ancient mythology. He is covered in a hail of bullets, and his steps are not in a hurry. Everyone came step by step. Boom, boom, boom. Accompanied by his footsteps, everyone felt as if they were shrouded in an invisible pressure. Their hearts shook violently, and they were instantly filled with fear. Driven by unparalleled fear, everyone's bodies gradually became stiff, and they couldn't even maintain the action of pulling the trigger. The original dense firepower became only sporadic, and finally, it gradually disappeared into invisible. Chapter 60. Slaughter. Seeing Chen Luo approaching step by step, everyone's eyes were filled with fear, and their bodies began to tremble slightly, as if they were about to get up and flee at any time. Fraser noticed this situation for the first time, and he is indeed the best fighter under Eli's command. Although he was also horrified by Chen Luo's performance just now, he forcibly suppressed the fear in his heart just for a moment. Down. A sharp light flashed in his eyes, and then he said loudly, "Give me a grenade. I can't believe he can still block it." As soon as these words came out, everyone woke up in an instant, as if grasping at the last straw. They hurriedly took out the grenade from their waists, and once again there was a glimmer of hope on their faces. That's right, we still have this. I can't believe it. This monster isn't even afraid of grenades. It will definitely work this time. This monster is sure to die. What are you waiting for? If you don't do anything, this monster will come up. Lois Hart yelled, and then he was the first to release the safety, and threw the grenade in the direction of Chen Luo. Seeing this, the others did not hesitate at all, and immediately prepared to attack. Seeing this, Chen Luo smiled coldly and said, "You have no chance." As soon as the voice fell, the next moment, Chen Luo disappeared in place in an instant. Now his speed has greatly increased compared to Dickens' time, and it is already 35 times that of ordinary people. This speed has truly reached the speed of sound. However, if such a terrifying speed is to be fully displayed, it also requires a considerable degree of physical strength to support it. If the body is not strong enough, as soon as it steps into the field of sonic speed, the body will gradually collapse due to being unable to support it, resulting in death. Fortunately, with Chen Luo's physical attributes as high as 50 points, coupled with the passive blessing of his steel body, it is very easy to support the speed to the limit. Finally, coupled with his huge strength of about several tons, today's Chen Luo, it can be said to be a humanoid killing weapon in the true sense. If it was said that he had to spend a lot of time dealing with these hundreds of people before, then now, with the number of this mere 100 people, if he wants to solve them all, it will be completely exhausting in less than a few seconds. In fact, Chen Luo wanted to play with them for a while, but it would be different if the other party took out a grenade. Although he is very confident in his physical strength, he is not confident enough to defend against grenades. On this point, he had done some tests as early as a month ago. Even if he has the passive ability of super speed regeneration, even if he is attacked by hundreds of grenades at the same time, he will not die, but behind him, there is Nissa. If he is attacked by so many grenades, there is no doubt that the opponent will definitely can't escape. Thinking of this, Chen Luo didn't have the intention to play anymore. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and then, just for a moment, he came to the second floor in front of everyone. A silver-white flash of light quickly began to emerge, then quickly circled around the corridor on the second floor, and finally gradually dissipated. After Chen Luo finished this series of actions, the grenade was also picked up by Chen Luo, who returned to the place with one hand, and then he threw it upwards and exploded above Chen Luo's head. Bang! Immediately afterwards, there was a huge amount of explosion sound, and the air wave was billowing, and the momentum was astonishing. But such an astonishing momentum did not have any impact on Chen Luo, and he was still standing intact. Looking up at the crowd in front of him, Chen Luo curled up a smile and waved his hand gently. "Goodbye, Two-Bit." Seeing Chen Luo's movements, everyone's eyes showed a trace of doubt, but in the next second, accompanied by a sharp pain from the neck, they finally came to their senses. "Am I dying?" Everyone's eyes were suddenly filled with fear, and they waved their hands subconsciously. Their eyes were fixed on Chen Luo's direction, and their faces were full of prayers, as if they were begging Chen Luo to spare their lives. Please, let me go. Lois Hart's eyes were full of longing for life, and at the same time, his heart was constantly filled with regret. If he had met Chen Luo for the first time, he should be more respectful and don't think about going against the other party. He shouldn't be so active in the siege of Chen Luo this time. But no matter how it thinks, it's too late now. Faced with Chen Luo's indiscriminate attack, their heads were cut off by Chen Luo in less than 2 seconds. Ask for flowers. The reason why he is still able to speak now is also because Chen Luo's speed is too fast. No matter how hard everyone struggles, they cannot escape their fate of imminent death. I don't want to die. Help me. Wei Lian waved her hands full of fear and turned to escape, but because of her movement, the speed of her death was instantly accelerated. A crack slowly appeared on the neck, and before she could react, the head and body were separated instantly, and then 2 flames burst out and instantly burned it to a mass of ashes. We lost this battle. 0. Different from the two, Phrase's expression was very calm, and he was not surprised at their ending at all. In the face of Chen Luo's overwhelming strength, the strength they are proud of is like a joke, and they can't pose the slightest threat to him. Even if they try their best, they can't escape the end of death. In this battle, he lost convincingly. Master Eli, I'm sorry, I can no longer serve you. A trace of regret flashed in Phrase's eyes, and then flames rose from his body, and his body instantly turned into ashes and dissipated. Immediately afterwards, no matter how painfully the crowd wailed, they could only watch their bodies burn out in clusters of bright flames, and their consciousness fell into darkness. In just a few seconds, the elite force that Eli brought to arrest Chen Luo was wiped out. Now, besides Chen Luo, the only one left who can still stand in this secret room is Eli. Looking around, looking at the patches of black ashes under his feet, Eli's already pale face suddenly became even paler. His originally confident eyes were instantly filled with fear, and he looked at Chen, who was walking towards him step by step. Luo, there was even a hint of fear on his face. Chen Luo, you can't kill me. Nisha is my daughter. If you do anything to her biological father, then she will never forgive you. Hearing this, Chen Luo stopped in his tracks instantly. Chapter 61 Death and Surrender. Seeing Chen Luo's actions, Eli was overjoyed and quickly said, Chen Luo, I assure you, as long as you let me go, I will never attack you again. Even my kingdom can be shared with you. Sounds great. Chen Luo looked at him with a half-smile. I can accept this proposal. However, before the other party was happy, Chen Luo's voice sounded again. But whether he accepts it or not is not certain. Hearing this, Eli's heart skipped a beat for an instant, and he subconsciously followed Chen Luo's line of sight. Then, his body instantly became stiff. His pupils constricted. His face couldn't stop turning pale, without a trace of blood. His lips parted slightly, and he said in a trembling voice, Norma. At the gate behind him, Norma walked towards the 910 people without any haste, and came to Eli. Looking at the face of the other party that was engraved in his soul, the corners of her mouth gradually widened, with an unconcealable smile on his face. Father, I finally found you. Looking at each other, Eli couldn't help taking a few steps back. With a stiff smile on his face, he explained tremblingly, My child, what has happened to you is a dreadful tragedy, a dreadful mistake. Speaking of this, he seemed to have a burst of courage in his heart, walked forward slowly, stretched out his hand and gently stroked his son's face, and said firmly in his eyes, Don't worry, my child. I will find the antidote to cure you. At that time, when you recover, I will give you the status you deserve. My kingdom will be shared with you. Afterwards, he gently hugged his son, hugged him tightly, and whispered to Norma's ear, You are my son and the prince of this kingdom. I promise you, you will get everything that belongs to you. Hearing this, Norma seemed a little moved, hesitatingly stretched out her hands and hugged her. Sensing the opponent's actions, the joy in Eli's eyes flashed away, but before he could breathe a sigh of relief, Norma's voice sounded, Father, if you are telling the truth, then why do I feel that your body is starting to tremble? Letting go of her hands, Norma took a step back. Seeing the other person's face stiffen instantly, her heart was full of sadness. But this sadness only lasted for a moment, before being filled with killing intent and resentment. Holding the opponent's body tightly with both hands, Norma showed no hesitation, roared to the sky, then opened his jaw like a calyx, and then bit her father's neck fiercely. No, do not want. Feeling the rapid loss of life in his body, Eli opened his hands subconsciously and kept waving and struggling. However, Norma didn't respond to this. She bit down, and then pulled hard, directly tearing out a large piece of the opponent's throat. Flesh. The throat was bitten open, and as the blood continued to spurt out, the strength of Eli's struggle began to weaken. In the end, Eli completely lost the strength to struggle. His hands drooped powerlessly, his eyes turned gray, and he didn't make a sound anymore. Seeing that the culprit who caused her to become what she is now has finally died, Norma's face was full of excitement. She couldn't help raised her head to the sky and screamed, and matched with her blood-soaked face, she looked very special, ferocious. Awakened by Norma's roar, Nisha, who had fallen into a coma, slowly opened her eyes, subconsciously looked at the source of the sound. Her pupils constricted instantly, and she couldn't help but speak. Father. Struggling to get up, he quickly walked to Chen Luo and the two of them. Looking at Eli, who had lost his voice in Norma's arms, his eyes were full of disbelief. Huh. Norma turned her head and looked at the sad Nisha, as if she had thought of something, with a cold smile on her face. You are my father's daughter, Nisha, right? Don't feel sad right now. I will send you to meet your father. This is the only thing I can do for him as a son. As she spoke, Norma casually threw Eli's body on the ground and slowly walked towards Nissa. Wait a moment. At this time, Chen Luo, who was still watching the play, finally stopped being silent and interrupted. Looking up at the other party, Chen Luo had a vague smile on his face and said, Norma, since Eli has been settled by you, the deal between us has been concluded. Now, I will trouble you to leave. This base is now mine. Norma paused, turned her head slowly, looked at Chen Luo indifferently and said, By the way, I also want to thank you for letting me find this base. But it's a pity, even though our cooperation is very pleasant. But who made you a vampire? Speaking of this, Norma's eyes flashed a cruel, murderous intent. Anyone who is a vampire should die. As soon as the words fell, he roared and rushed towards Chen Luo. Seeing the opponent's calyx-like jaw blooming in the air, Chen Luo frowned subconsciously and said, You look like this? You really look disgusting. What did you say? Norma raged for a moment, as if she had been touched by a scale. Her face was filled with mad, killing intent. Her feet accelerated a few minutes. She came to Chen Luo with a roar and yelled at him. Launched an attack. Die to me. Dirty vampires. They shouldn't exist in this world. Stay away from me. I don't want to touch you. Disgusting guy. Seeing the opponent rushing towards him, Chen Luo finally couldn't help it, raised his foot, and kicked forward with all his strength. Boom! Just as soon as he made contact, Chen Luo's terrifying power of several tons was released towards Norma immediately. With a loud noise, Norma's body flew backwards like a shell, and then fell heavily, hit the wall behind. There was no room for resistance at all. The moment she touched the wall, before she could even let out a scream, Norma's body turned into a puddle of flesh and blood, spreading flat on the wall. Right. In the blink of an eye, Norma, who was originally fierce and commanding an army of thousands of mutants, died at Chen Luo's feet, like a bug that was randomly crushed to death without making a sound. After finishing the opponent, Chen Luo turned around, looked down, and opened his mouth slowly. Should you two wake up? How about it? Now that your king has been killed, what are your plans next? Hearing this, the two people who had already woken up suddenly opened their eyes, looked at each other awkwardly, then got up and came to Chen Luo. Kneeling on one knee, the two bowed their heads deeply and said respectfully, My lord, we are willing to follow you. Use the rest of our lives to prove our loyalty. Chapter 62. All slaughtered and the empire destroyed. That's right. Get up. Chen Luo nodded lightly and agreed. Seeing the two get up, Chen Luo then pointed to Nisha beside him and said, You have only one task next, protect her. I have to go out for a while. If I come back and see something wrong with Nisha, you know the consequences. The calm tone carried the terrifying pressure as heavy as a mountain. Feeling the terrifying aura coming from Chen Luo, the two of them sweated slightly on their foreheads, and they responded loudly. Yes, Master Chen Luo. Chen Luo nodded slightly. Then you stay here. After I clean up the outside, it's time for those mutants to disappear. Immediately, Chen Luo immediately walked towards the gate. But then, he seemed to think of something, first turned around and walked downstairs, then picked up the sharp axe on the ground, nodded in satisfaction, and then turned and left. When he came outside the gate, he hadn't taken a few steps. Immediately afterwards, not far from his left, a figure leaped forward in an instant, opening its 19 jaws like a calyx, and there was even a trace of crystal hanging down from the edge. Extraordinarily ferocious and terrifying. Go away. Don't come near me. Chen Luo didn't turn his head back. The axe in his hand cut through the air suddenly, splitting the mutant in half instantly. Facing this disgusting creature, Chen Luo even subconsciously wanted to keep a distance from him. Before he could get closer, he swung his axe, starting a ruthless battle. Feast. With a movement of his feet, his figure turned into a long afterimage, traveling across the base. All the life that I saw on the way, whether it was a mutant or a vampire, couldn't escape Chen Luo's eyes. Except for the vampires that hadn't been bitten, none of them escaped Chen Luo's killing. Two halves, killed on the spot. Although he was not advancing at full speed, Chen Luo's speed was still astonishing. Coupled with his terrifying killing efficiency, he wiped out all the mutants in the entire base in less than an hour. After an hour of fighting, there are only 10 or so remaining vampires in the base at this moment, and only a few hundred people survived. As for the other 2,000 vampires, either they were torn into pieces by a crowd of mutants, or they were bitten by mutants, injured, and then transformed into a new mutant. Including the original thousands of mutants, a total of more than 3,000 mutants all died in Chen Luo's hands. A mountain of corpses and a sea of blood gathered at his feet, making his figure even more stunning. Because it was not burned with ultraviolet rays, these corpses did not turn into ashes and dissipated. Countless corpses that were divided into two parts covered the entire ground, and blood flowed wantonly on the ground, dyeing the entire base into a sea of blood. Holding the axe that was dripping blood continuously, Chen Luo looked at the red-stained ground under his feet. Chen Luo frowned, then raised his head and looked at the group of surviving vampires in front of him. "Come here, all of you." Hearing this, everyone trembled subconsciously, raised their heads cautiously, looked at Chen Luo's demon-like figure, and said tremblingly, "My lord, what can I do for you? The ground is too dirty, clean it up for me. I want to see him back to his original state, understand?" "Yes, my lord, we understand." Hearing this, everyone was relieved and nodded their heads in agreement. Seeing this, Chen Luo nodded slowly, then turned and disappeared in place. Seeing Chen Luo's back gradually going away, everyone swallowed subconsciously, their eyes full of fear. Is this the strength of the butcher in the legend? It is said that this lord once slaughtered thousands of people by himself. I thought it was just a legend. Now it seems that Jianzhong really can't be true anymore. Now in the entire base, except for us, everyone else has been killed by Mr. Chen Luo. That's more than 3,000 people. It's really scary. Master Chen Luo's strength should be regarded as the strongest among us vampires, right? And he seems to be a daywalker like that blade. I really can't think of anyone else who can compete with such power. Just as everyone was feeling emotional, suddenly, a stern voice sounded. "What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear what Lord Chen Luo said just now? If you don't clean it up quickly, if you make the Lord unhappy, the next 10 dead will be you." As soon as these words came out, everyone woke up in an instant. A trace of fear flashed in their eyes, and they didn't dare to neglect any more and quickly started to act. At the same time, Chen Luo has already returned to the secret room where Nisha was. Grown-ups. Seeing Chen Luo approaching, Snowman Zhuangpa and the two hurried over. "Good job. You guys go out first. I have something to talk to Nissa alone." In addition, the mutants outside have been cleaned up, but it's a bit messy outside. So go and help clean it up? "Yes." After the two left, only Chun and Luanissa were left here. Slowly coming to Nisha's side. Looking at her sad face, Chen Luo sighed softly, and then said, "Nissa, I'm sorry." Hearing this, Nisha shook her head slowly. "It's not your fault. It's father who wanted to do something to you. And if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have chosen to come here. If you really want to say 317, if you want to say sorry, it should be me." After saying this, Nissa lowered her head and looked at Eli's body beside her, her body trembling slightly. "It's just that I didn't expect that father is such a person. He actually did that to my elder brother. Maybe in his heart, Norma and I are just his pawns from beginning to end." Just after saying this, Nisha suddenly felt her body warm up, and then she was embraced by Chen Luo into Huaichen. Gently stroking her hair, Chen Luo's voice became softer. "Don't be sad. You still have me." Although it was only a short sentence, it seemed to break Nisha's heart in an instant. Her eyes gradually became red, and finally she couldn't help it. She threw herself into Chen Luo's arms and hugged him tightly. A week later, as a piece of news spread, after receiving the news, there was an uproar in the dark world. North Bear Domestic. After Eli's death, the Moschino's dynasty declared its end. Afterwards, Eli's daughter, Nissa Moschino's, was all merged into Chen Luo's forces. For a while, the power of Chen Luo's family skyrocketed. At the same time, with the spread of a gossip, the name of Chen Luo's butcher once again resounded throughout the dark world, causing countless people to be terrified. Chapter 63, Shocking the Quartet and Returning. According to this gossip, the reason why the Moschino's dynasty will collapse is because of the rebellion of Norma, the son of Eli. After being transformed into a mutant by Eli, Norma is determined to avenge her father. Relying on the terrifying infectivity of mutants and the ability that can infect even vampires, in just 1 month, an army of thousands of mutants was successfully formed, and they launched an attack on the base of the Moschino's dynasty. And in this rebellion, countless elites were massacred by mutants in the process of fighting against it, and most of the dynasty's elites were completely destroyed, even the king of this kingdom. Eli Moschino's also died in the hands of his own son, Norma. In this battle, it was at this critical juncture that Chen Luo, who was invited to the base by Nisha, the daughter of Eli, finally made a move, showing unparalleled terrifying power, and wiped out all the mutants in the base. Slaughter all by himself, including the mutant ruler, Norma. They all died in this battle against Chen Luo. Although relying on the power of Chen Luo, a small number of people in the base survived, but compared to the previous grand occasion, the current Mosquitoes dynasty has survived in name only, and will never return to its former grand occasion. Perhaps because of this consideration, Nisha, who took over as the leader of the Mosquitoes family, decided to join the Chen Luo family and seek Chen Luo's protection. Therefore, all the vampire forces in the North Bear Kingdom also fell into Chen Luo's hands. After this news came out, it can be said that it shocked the attention of countless people, making them even more afraid of Chen Luo. If the previous rumors about Chen Luo slaughtering thousands of people in one night are still to be confirmed, then today's news is much easier to judge. After all, in the North Bear Kingdom, there is only one vampire force, the Mosquitoes dynasty, that controls it. There are countless industries. To judge whether it is really a big loss in strength, you only need to launch a test on several of the major industries and see the reaction of the other party. It must mean that the previous rumors are indeed true, and the result was just as they expected. Facing the temptation of other forces, the Mosquitoes family only sent 2 vampires to solve it. Seeing this, the other forces immediately understood that the current Mosquitoes family might have really lost their strength and would never be the same again. But with their current strength, they are in charge of wealth worth tens of billions, which can't help but make countless forces greedy. However, just as they were about to do something, Snowman and Chupa, the 2 vampires sent by Mosquitoes, announced at this time that the Mosquitoes family has now joined Mr. Chen Luo. For those who want to do something to them, Chen Luo will come to them personally to talk to them. Hearing this, they also remembered that the Mosquitoes family has already joined Chen Luo's command. If they want to take action against them, they must consider Chen Luo's subsequent deterrence. Reminiscent of Chen Luo's terrifying record, for a while, many forces retreated one after another. But there are also a few who are not afraid of death. Facing the dialect of the Snowman and the others, not only did they not pay attention to it at all, but they also seemed to be provocative. Taking advantage of Nissa's inability to send people to guard the property, they directly occupied the magpie's nest and forcibly take it for yourself. Faced with such behavior, Chen Luo will definitely not be indifferent to them. After finding out the base camp of these forces, Chen Luo even came to the door alone. After finding the other party's base camp, he immediately picked up the butcher knife. For 3 days in a row, Chen Luo launched a bloody massacre again, and after destroying all these forces, he shocked countless forces even more. Under the absolute force displayed by Chen Luo, everyone did not dare to act rashly, and no longer had any thoughts about the properties under the Mosquitoes family. And after Chen Luo slaughtered several small forces, although he also knew that there must be shadows of other forces behind these forces, but these forces are not easy to mess with, so Chen Luo has no plans to settle accounts with them for the time being, but after frightening the opponent severely, he gave up. After all, the current strength of the Mosquitoes family has been greatly damaged, and the top priority is to recover as soon as possible and recuperate. As long as the strength of the past is restored, even without Chen Luo's deterrence, they still have the ability to keep these industries today. But Chen Luo doesn't intend to take care of these things. After deterring the forces of all parties, he has already taught Nisha to deal with the development of the vampire forces in the North Bear country. He will solve it. So, after staying here for a few more days, Chen Luo finally didn't intend to stay any longer and was ready to leave for New York. Regarding this point, Nisha also knew Chen Luo's thoughts a long time ago. Although she was very reluctant, she also understood that this situation is already the best choice. Realizing that she was about to part with Chen Luo, she could say that she was entangled with Chen Luo every day these days. So when Chen Luo left that day, even with his current physique, she felt a little sore in the waist. After bidding farewell to Nisha, Chen Luo turned and walked into the airport behind him. After 10 hours, he finally returned to New York smoothly. Outside the airport, Kasong, who had already received the news, immediately sent someone to greet him. So just after Chen Luo walked out of the airport, he saw a familiar figure waving to him from afar. Brutal, it's you, W. Chen Luo stepped forward, saw the person coming, and immediately recognized him, with a smile on his face, and nodded slightly to him. Boss. Seeing that Chen Luo recognized him, Bruto was very excited, looked at Chen Luo with admiration, and said quickly, I will be your exclusive driver from now on. What do you want in the future? Where to go? Please just tell me. I will arrive as quickly as possible. Oh, is that so, New Elise? Then I will trouble you. Chen Luo showed a gentle smile on his face, and gently patted the other party's shoulder to encourage him. Yes. Receiving Chen Luo's encouragement, Brutal replied with an excited face. Soon, Chen Luo returned to his base camp, Edgewood Mansion. As the base camp of the former Dickon, after Chen Luo got it, he had no intention of changing it. He also regarded it as his base camp, just like Dickon. It has been taken care of by Blade. All the way to the top floor, pushed open the huge amounts of office door, looked at the figure sitting on the large chair, looking at the documents, Chen Luo greeted with a smile. Long time no see, Brad. Blade, that is. Brad raised his head immediately after hearing these words, and when he saw Chen Luo, his eyes lit up instantly. Chapter 64. Come to the appointment. Dinner party. Without thinking about it, he dropped the document in his hand, and Blade quickly came to Chen Luo, complaining non-stop. Damn it, you bastard is finally back. While saying this, he dragged Chen Luo to his original seat, pressed it down hard, and then said, let's leave it to you to deal with these shitty things yourself. Looking at these documents every day these days, I'm going crazy. Don't come to me for this kind of thing in the future. I think it's best for me to do this kind of thing. Huh? Chen Luo looked at him with some doubts and said in confusion, why? Didn't I also ask Mr. Whistler and Kasong to help you? Isn't it enough? What can you do? Blade had a look of helplessness in his eyes and said, the old man will only develop weapons and equipment all his life, so how can he manage them? There is also Kasong. He knows some management. During the days when you are not here, most of the things are handled by him. However, our power is expanding too fast, and there are too many things now, and he can't handle it alone. And I can't play any role here. I still need you to sit in the town. Before Chen Luo left, he also had his own considerations about who would hand over the power here to 037. Among the vampires, strength is the most respected, and in the family created by Chen Luo, apart from himself, Blade must be the most powerful. Having him sit in charge can also play a great deterrent effect, making his base camp unstoppable. As for other management tasks, Chen Luo also asked Whistler and Kasong to share the pressure of Blade, because Chen Luo wiped out many small vampire forces a while ago. So the industries they left behind also need someone to take care of them. Not only the industry, but also those newly joined vampires also need a certain amount of education, so the burden on the master is also very heavy. And because the three of them are not very proficient in management, the busyness these days has also made them burn out. Now that Chen Luo is back, it is understandable that Blade would be so eager to throw these things to him. After Blade left, looking at the documents on the table, Chen Luo also rubbed his head with some headaches and said to himself, it seems that I need to find someone to help me share it. In the blink of an eye, 2 weeks passed. BJDB. After 2 weeks of overtime work, Chen Luo finally finished the initial handling of the affairs here and handed over all the properties under his care to professional managers. As for the thousands of vampires in his family, they were handed over to Kasong. Manage. As for Blade, because he is not very interested in these things, Chen Luo also arranged a special task for him. Now Chen Luo in New York is already the only one, and it will take some time to digest the current harvest and will not expand externally for the time being, but the North Bear country is different. After the family's strength was greatly weakened, Nissa was in urgent need of manpower, and after the fall of the Moschino's dynasty, no one among the many small and medium-sized vampire forces that had been keeping themselves safe had been able to subdue them. The situation on the other side is also in turmoil. Under such circumstances, going with Blade's combat power just happened to give him a chance to show his talents, and he was also happy to go. After dealing with the matter at hand, Chen Luo also remembered the agreement he had made with Tony before leaving, and recalled the other party's face after losing to him. Chen Luo immediately dialed the phone a little impatiently. Mr. Stark, I have your call. In a huge luxurious apartment, a huge amounts of carnival party is being held at the moment. Accompanied by the explosive music, in the center of the crowd, Tony was dancing with a hot model in his arms, moving his feet while telling jokes, making fun of. The beautiful woman in Bewley had a smile on her face. Looking at the eyes that the other party sent to him from time to time, Tony couldn't help but feel hot inside. At this moment, he even made a plan in his heart. After the party was over, he would take the other party back to his Seaview villa, and then have an in-depth communication. However, just as he was thinking about it, suddenly, a voice rang from his ears. Looking back, Tony frowned subconsciously and said, happy as I said, don't bother me at this time. No matter who is looking for me, just refuse to answer. But this call was made by you, sir, who set a special reminder, saying that you have an important bet with the other party that has not been completed. Gambling? Tony was puzzled for a while, and then quickly reacted. His brows loosened, and his face suddenly showed interest. It's him? Well, then you can call me. While answering the phone, Tony looked at the female companion next to him with an apologetic face and said, sorry, Pooh, I may have to stay away for a while. Pooh nodded, and then gently kissed Tony on the face. His eyes were full of charm. Then I'll wait for you. Looking at the back of the other party leaving, Tony's heart fluttered, and he couldn't wait. But he still hadn't forgotten the business, so he calmed down for a while, and then came to a secluded place and connected the phone. Hey, Chan. Hearing this familiar voice, Chen Luo smiled and was about to speak. But before he could speak, Tony's voice sounded again. Look, man, I know I still owe you a dinner, but I'm afraid not tonight. I have a very important date. So how about we make an appointment for tomorrow night? I have time tomorrow. Hearing this, Chen Luo subconsciously raised his eyebrows, His eyes were full of smiles, but his face was full of regret and said, "What a coincidence. Tony, I'm already on my way to the airport. I'll be there in a few hours. I don't think you want your guests to starve like this, do you? Oh, damn it. Why did you choose today? My date was ruined by you." Hearing this, Tony immediately wailed in frustration, recalling the graceful figure of the other party in his mind, and his eyes were full of pity. After hanging up the phone, Tony returned to the spot listlessly. Under Pooh's astonished gaze, he suppressed the pain in his heart, rejected the other party's invitation, then turned around and left, got in the car, and walked all the way home. At the same time, almost at the same time, after hanging up the phone, Chen Luo immediately called Bruto and changed the itinerary. Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo boarded his private jet overnight and flew towards Los Angeles at high speed. When I got home, I checked the time. It was about an hour before Chen Luo came to the door. This time was enough for him to prepare a dinner. "Asshole, today's dinner. I will make it unforgettable for you forever." Recalling the figure that caused him to miss an important date, Tony's eyes flickered coldly. He gritted his teeth and said with a gloomy expression. Chapter 65 Congenial Smells. Ding. The doorbell rang, and Tony was refreshed when he had just placed the prepared dinner. A gleam flashed in his eyes, and then he turned around and walked towards the door. Pushing open the door, as expected, Chen Luo was standing at the door, looking at him with a smile on his face and said, "Long time no see. Tony. Chen, you're finally here." Tony also smiled and invited Chen Luo in enthusiastically. Then he quickly walked to the dining table in the living room, pointed at the dinner plate on the table, and greeted. "It's just right. You came over just after I finished dinner. The time is just right, so let's start." "You're welcome, just eat." As he said that, he called Chen Luo to sit down, and then pushed the plate full of a large steak on the table to Chen Luo, patted his chest, and promised with a confident face, "This is the top-quality beef imported from Kobe. The taste is absolutely top-notch. Coupled with my cooking skills, it will definitely make you full of praise." "Really?" Chen Luo lowered his head and looked at the piece of charred beef on the plate in front of him. His complexion turned slightly black. "Are you sure it's edible?" Facing Chen Luo's skeptical gaze, Tony's expression was as usual, explaining, "Don't look at it, although it looks a little dark on the outside. But as long as you cut the skin, the meat inside is very tender, and with my secret seasoning, you will never be disappointed." Looking at his swearing face, for some reason, Chen Luo really believed his nonsense, picked up the knife, and carefully cut the skin open. As expected, the meat inside was not as dark as the surface. At this scene, Chen Luo finally felt relieved. In his mind, as long as the steak looks normal, it should be unpalatable. Even if the steak may not be fully cooked and there is still blood in it. But he is a vampire now, such a little impact on it's not a problem at all for him. With this in mind, Chen Luo cut off a small piece of steak and slowly put it in his mouth. Vomit. "Wow, this steak is really good. It's delicious." Chen Luo kept chewing while giving Tony a thumbs up. "Huh? Is it really that delicious?" Looking at Chen Luo's expression, Tony couldn't help blinking, and looked at the steak in front of him with a puzzled expression. Chen Luo has no intention of explaining this at all. At this time, only actions can prove his thoughts. I saw that after eating one piece, he still felt that it was not enough. So he cut off a small piece and put it in his mouth. Seeing Chen Luo eating with a satisfied face, Tuodian couldn't help but fell into deep thought. "Is it really that delicious? How about I will try it too?" Thinking of this, Tony couldn't resist the temptation. After all, he had only been home for about an hour. He was busy drinking at the party before, and now he didn't have time to eat. He was already hungry. Seeing that Chen Luo was feasting, Tony stopped hesitation, cut off a large piece of steak, and put it in his mouth. "Whoa, damn it. What is this?" Just after taking a sip, Tony's face changed drastically. He turned around and hugged the trash can under his feet, spit out all the steak he just ate, panting heavily. Recalling the taste just now, he still couldn't help retching more than. After a while, Tony finally regained his composure, stood up and turned to look at Chen Luo. With a very unfriendly expression on his face, he said, "You bastard, did you do it on purpose?" Now he has also reacted, knowing that what Chen Luo did just now was to trick him into eating the steak, and he was a little too naive. Knowing exactly what ingredients he added, he still believed the other party nonsense. Now that I think about it, it's a shame to throw it home. "You still have the face to criticize me? Just 2 steaks? You put so much pepper and chili sauce. I really underestimate you, ghost chef. Asshole, if you didn't spoil my good business tonight, I wouldn't use this method." "Oh, that's really embarrassing. I deliberately decided to come to you now because I heard that you have a date tonight. How about it? Are you surprised or not? Damn it, you bastard really did it on purpose." Hearing this, Tony's face turned dark for an instant. Looking at the other party, his fists gradually clenched. Seeing his actions, Chen Luo raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Why? Don't you agree? Hearing this, Tony couldn't bear it anymore and jumped forward. Asshole, don't think that I can't beat you if you train like a bodybuilder. To tell you the truth, I have been practicing boxing every day these days. See if I can teach you a lesson. Let you know how powerful I am. Ah, it hurts, let it go. Wrote. Before he finished speaking, Chen Luo, who had been waiting impatiently for a long time, didn't want to listen to his nonsense immediately, reached out his hand, grasped the right hand of the other party in his hand for a moment, and then swept it lightly. Tony immediately screamed out. Letting go of the other party casually, Chen Luo looked at him with a half-smile and said, "Why? Do you still want to try? Please, I'm not a fool. Why do you try something you know you can't win?" Tony stretched his wrist, gave Chen Luo a blank look, and said angrily. Although it was only for a short moment, he already clearly knew the gap in force between the two, so he had no choice but to give up the idea of repairing Chen Luo. Sitting weakly on the sofa, touching his hungry stomach, Tony said helplessly, "Then what should we do now? How about dinner?" You must know that he doesn't have the habit of cooking, and he bought the 2 steaks before knowing that Chen Luo was coming. It can be said that apart from these 2 steaks, there is no other food here. This is your place. You ask me how could I know? Chen Luo was also sitting on the sofa, looking at each other angrily. That's true. Tony stroked his chin and thought for a while. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something, and his eyes lit up instantly. What do you think? Let's hold a carnival here. I'll contact you and let them bring some food along the way, so that we can fill our stomachs and attend the party. Wouldn't it kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Turning his head to look at Chen Luo, Tony suggested with bright eyes. Good idea. Chen Luo immediately clapped his hands in agreement and then suggested, but for this party, only the 2 of us are enough. What do you think? Then definitely. How can I invite men to my party? Tony immediately understood, raised his eyebrows at Chen Luo, with a smile on the corner of his mouth, and slowly said, Damn it, Chen. I found that I seem to like you a little bit. Me too, Tony. The 2 looked at each other and smiled. The smiles were full of different meanings. Chapter 66 Chen Luo's Proposal. Noon the next day. Inside Tony's seaside villa, in a large and luxurious bedroom, Chen Luo, who was soundly asleep, was suddenly awakened by the sound of arguing and opened his eyes. What sound? Slowly got up, then opened the door and walked towards the living room. Damn, Tony, why didn't you call me last night? Look what I missed. 2 parties in a row. Bastard, can you handle it by yourself? Tony lay on the sofa, half closed his eyes, looked at his friend in front of him with some difficulty, waved his hands lazily, and said, Rod, can you say a few words less? I had so much fun last night. I'm still a little dizzy. Damn it. Hearing this, Rod's eyes turned green, and his face was full of jealousy. There are so many beauties at the party. Can you take care of them alone? Also, where did you put my good brother? I used to never forget to call you every time I held a party, but now you are treating me like this. Okay, stop complaining. Hearing his friend's words, Tony felt a little apologetic in his heart, and was about to open his mouth to apologize. But at this moment, his peripheral vision suddenly caught the Chen Luo walked out of the bedroom. After seeing him, Tony lifted his spirits and quickly changed his words. Brother, I actually wanted to ask you to come and see me last night too. But Chen told me that he didn't want to see other men at the party. After all, he was my guest and I couldn't refuse this request, so I can say sorry to you. What? Rode stared, subconsciously turned his head and looked over. But when he saw Chen Luo, his eyes couldn't help showing a hint of wonder, his handsome face, and his sculpted figure that could be seen clearly even in pajamas. As a man, he also had to admit that the man in front of him was simply outmatched by the external conditions alone. Chen Luo walked towards the 2 of them. After hearing Tony's words, he spread his hands helplessly, looked at the future war machine, and explained, Friend, I think you should know about Tony. If he agrees with himself, how could he listen to me? And I saw it all last night. Tony was having so much fun. At the end of the party, he even walked into the bedroom with 2 big beauties. I think I didn't have you as a good friend in my heart at that time, Bar? What? 2. As soon as he said this, Rhodes' eyes turned green with envy, and he stared straight at Tony. But before he could jump, Tony was the first one who couldn't sit still and pointed Chen Luo, with an indignant look on his face, said, Damn it, Chen, you still have the nerve to call me? If I count 2 too many, what about you? I saw them all last night. You bastard actually brought 5 back. I could hear you all night last night. Damn it, if I knew I shouldn't have let you stay in my house. And I can't even sleep well. Hearing Tony's words, Rhodes on the side was completely dumbfounded, and looked at Chen Luo with a look of astonishment. His face was full of admiration. Facing the gazes of the 2, Chen Luo waved his hands, and said with a profound expression, This is actually nothing. After all, we are of different races. If you are vampires like me, you can have such good physical strength. The two were stunned, and a question mark slowly appeared above their heads. What did you say? A vampire? Tony rolled his eyes and sneered. Do you think we are 3-year-olds? Do you still believe this? You are more reliable than a vampire, even if you say you are a mutant. After saying this, Tony then pointed out the window and asked, Rod, what time is it? 12 o'clock at noon. Rhodes subconsciously replied, That's right. It's daytime now. Tony snapped his fingers, then pointed at Chen Luo, who was bathing in the sun, and said, Since you are a vampire, why do you still appear during the daytime like us? I remember right. If so, vampires should be afraid of the sun, right? After Tony's explanation, Rhodes also seemed to react, and also looked at Chen Luo with disbelief. Since you don't believe it, then I can't help it. Seeing this, Chen Luo shrugged and did not explain. After all, he had already told them the truth. Whether they believed it or not was their business, not his own. Okay, Chen, you have eaten dinner now, shouldn't you leave today? Tony looked at Chen Luo impatiently and asked. Although Chen Luo's personality suits his liking, and the two can be regarded as friends now, after the party last night, he also understood another thing. That is, if there is Chen Luo at the party, his limelight will probably be overshadowed by Chen Luo, but this kind of situation makes him, who has always been in the limelight, unacceptable anyway. As if seeing what the other person was thinking, Chen Luo slumped lazily on the sofa and said, No, I've changed my mind. Next, I plan to play here for a few days, but I don't have a place to live in Los Angeles, so let me just live here. What? No way. Tony jumped up in protest. However, before he could speak his objection, Chen Luo's voice sounded again. Then in exchange, I will pay for the cost of our next party. What do you think of this proposal? Before Tony could speak, Rhodes immediately covered his mouth with his hand, nodded repeatedly, with an unconcealable smile on his face, and said excitedly, No problem, Chen. I sure didn't misread you. You this friend, I made it up. But just after finishing this sentence, Rhodes suddenly thought of something, looked at Chen Luo with some hesitation, and asked, However, hosting a party costs a lot. Chen, can you afford it? At this time, Tony, who finally broke free from Rhodes' hands, rolled his eyes angrily when he heard this, and said, Don't worry about 5.9. This guy has the same wealth as me, and he has to pay for a few parties. It's no problem at all. Today, Tony has just taken over Stark Group, and there is still a long way to go before he will become a behemoth with a market value of trillions. Therefore, his current net worth is only around 100 billion, which is not much different from Chen Luo. Upon hearing this, Rhodes immediately felt relieved, rubbing his hands excitedly, and said impatiently, Then what are we waiting for? How about starting today? To this, Chen Luo and Tony definitely had no reason to object, and they all nodded in agreement. P.S. I will explain the problem of the system here. There is only one reason why the previous chapters did not appear. The opponent is too weak, and if you give too much cheating to the protagonist, I am worried that I will not be able to stabilize the rhythm. It will appear in other places in the future. I will try to arrange a reasonable route for the protagonist to become stronger. Chapter 67A Whim. Within the following month, Chen Luo, Tony, and Rhodes are singing every night in Los Angeles. Large and small file-size parties are held every day, and sometimes there are even 2 or 3 parties in a day. It can be described as crazy. Under the leadership of Tony and Rhodes, the two old fritters, Chen Luo can be regarded as letting go and having a great time. And even after playing for about a month, relying on his strong physique as a foundation, Chen Luo still looks like a dragon and a tiger, which is in stark contrast to the other two. On the sofa in the living room, after playing wildly for a month, Tony and Rhodes were lying there weakly. They touched their hungry stomach after not eating for nearly a day. With 2 black eyes, Tony shouted loudly towards the kitchen. Chun, is lunch ready? I'm starving to death. Me too. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly felt something. Rhodes' expression changed, and he quickly got up and ran towards the bathroom. Then, there was a sound of 19 vomiting. After a while, Rhodes dragged his exhausted body, staggered out of the bathroom, collapsed on the sofa, and said weakly, I can't do it. I have held parties for a month, and now I feel that my whole body is flowing its all alcohol. If I drink any more, I'm afraid I'm going to be in the ICU. Me too. Tony stared blankly at the front, then seemed to remember something, turned his head to look in the direction of the kitchen. His face was full of envy. Damn it. What the hell did that animal Chen do? Arrived? It's been a month, and he's playing crazier than us. Why is he still acting like a normal person now? That guy is really full of energy. In my opinion, even if he plays for another month, it won't affect him at all. Rhodes was also envious of Chen Luo's physical fitness. If they saw Chen Luo's inhuman performance of 1-on-5 at the beginning, they still suspected that Chen Luo had such fighting power because of some knocks. But after nearly a month, if he took drugs, it would be impossible for him to behave like he is now. So in the end, they could only blame it on personal physical problems. For Chen Luo's inhuman physique, The two could only shaking his head helplessly. At this moment, suddenly, a burst of aroma came from the kitchen and floated in front of the two of them. Subconsciously taking a deep breath, both of them lifted their spirits, got up quickly, and turned their heads to look at the kitchen. Okay, it's done. Come and eat. Chen Luo's voice sounded, and immediately after, he came to the two of them with 2 golden fried rice plates and put them on the dining table. Gudong. Subconsciously swallowed, the eyes of the two of them were a little straight. It smells so good. It looks good. Looking at the food in front of them, the two of them, who were already hungry, didn't care about being reserved. They picked up the plate, scooped up a large spoonful, and then put it in their mouths. Tasty. After chewing a few mouthfuls, the two people's eyes began to shine, and they buried their heads and began to eat wildly. In less than 3 minutes, 2 full plates of fried rice were wiped out by the two of them. Who comfortable. After filling their stomachs, the two sat down on the sofa with satisfied faces and let out a long breath. I really didn't see it. Chin, your cooking skills are really good. I really like this lunch. Thumbs up to Chen Luo, Rhodes said very satisfied. Chen, what kind of food is this? I feel like I've fallen in love with it. I think it's necessary to add this kind of food to my recipe in the future. It's nothing. It's just an ordinary plate of fried rice with eggs. You can find it in any Chinese restaurant in Los Angeles. Chen Luo made a brief mention, then sat down on the sofa, looked at the two with great interest and said, You should be full by now, right? How about it? When shall we start the next game? Hearing this, the two looked at each other subconsciously, and Chiamo shook his head in agreement. Chen, I think it's better to forget it. The party has been held for a month, and I'm already feeling a little tired. That's right. Party or something. It's getting a bit boring now. The two opened their mouths to evade insincerely, but their hearts were secretly bleeding. Just kidding. The party is so fun. How could they get bored? It's just that they know that their current bodies can't bear it to continue like this, and they don't want to watch Chen Luo eat alone. So they all agree not to mention it anymore, throwing a party at once. Is that so? That's really a pity. Chen Luo nodded. Seeing the faces of the two of them now, he knew it in his heart. I think we can play something else. At this moment, Tony suddenly suggested, What do you think? How about we go on an adventure? Adventure? Hearing this, Chen Luo and the two were stunned, and looked at Tony with puzzled expressions. That's right. As if thinking of something, Tony looked at the two excitedly, and said, Have you ever heard of the Bermuda Triangle? Maybe we can go there and check it out. Bermuda Triangle? Rhodes' face became a little dignified. I heard that there are often incidents of missing ships or planes, and the climate in that area is also very bad, and the magnetic field is very chaotic. If we go there, it could be dangerous. That's exciting, isn't it? Hearing this, Tony's eyes began to light up, looking even more eager to try. 803. Turning to look at Chen Luo, Tony asked, Chun, what do you think? Regarding this, Chen Luo shrugged slightly and said indifferently, I have no objection. Although it sounds like Bermuda is indeed a restricted area for humans, this is not the case for Chen Luo. With his current strength, even if he encounters an accident midway and falls into the sea, with his physique and self-healing power, even with swimming alone, he is sure to be able to swim out with the two of them, so he definitely won't feel worried. Seeing Chen Luo's reaction, Tony became more confident, turned his head to look at Rhodes, and said with a firm expression on his face, Don't worry, Rhodes. We'll take a look around the area first, and if it feels wrong, we'll retreat. There won't be any danger. In that case, there's nothing wrong with that. Rhodes thought for a moment, finally nodded slowly, and agreed. Seeing that both of them agreed, Tony did what he thought and started to contact his private jet without any hesitation. Not long after that, they took Chen Luo and the two of them straight to the airport. After getting on the plane, fly to your destination. Chapter 68 Bermuda, Air Crash. 10,000 meters high. A luxurious private jet is flying forward at a speed exceeding Mach 1, gradually approaching its destination. Inside the cabin, JRVIS, how long does it take to get to Bermuda? Tony sat on the seat, shaking the glass in his hand, and asked with a relaxed expression. There is still half an hour, sir. At this moment, a sound like mechanical synthesis sounded from the cabin. Hearing this answer, Tony nodded in satisfaction, and a trace of anticipation flashed in his eyes. I don't know what will be in Bermuda. I am really looking forward to this expedition. Maybe there may be any prehistoric relics. I really want to see the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Rhodes said with a smile. Maybe there will be an orangutan tens of meters tall? If we can find such a creature, then we will be famous. Chen Luo seemed to have thought of something, and a smile appeared on his face. Famous? Is there anyone in this world who doesn't know me now? Come on, I'm the famous Tony Stark. Tony rolled his eyes, but then changed the subject and said, But if the creature you're talking about it really exists, it is a good research material. The three of them were chatting in the cabin. Chen Luo glanced around. A A flash of admiration flashed in his eyes and said, "But I really didn't expect that, Tony. You have already researched artificial intelligence. You have also realized the unmanned aircraft, which is really amazing." Although Tony is a playboy, his reputation as a super genius is not something that he has just blown away. Seriously, if this guy is given a while, he might even be able to research mechanical life. Speaking of this, Luo Da also nodded in agreement. As for the center of the discussion between the two, Tony sat on his seat with a face full of pride and said without humility, "That's definitely, I haven't seen anyone smarter than me in this world." Not always. Chen Luo said silently in his heart. Among other things, let's talk about the future Amar. Fantastic, Reed Richards, who is known as the world's smartest at Columbia University in New York. There is also his old enemy, Dr. Doom, who is not as intelligent as Tony and dumb. Although the two have not yet graduated, they have already begun to emerge. Thinking about it, in a few years, the wisdom shown by these two people is enough to make Qian Fan listen. In addition to these two, there are also a group of super geniuses such as Dr. Banner, the first Ant-Man Hank Pym, etc. Among them, except for Dr. Pym's early retirement, everyone else is still unknown. When these people officially rise up at that time, Tony may not have the confidence to say this again. While thinking about these things, Chen Luo suddenly seemed to remember something, looked at Tony with great interest and said, "By the way, Tony, have you considered moving your corporate headquarters to New York?" "Huh? Why do you have such an idea?" Tony froze for a moment and looked at Chen Luo in confusion. "It's nothing. I just feel that New York should be very lively in the future. I think you will be interested because you like lively things." Chen Luo shrugged and said casually, "Besides, New York is also my territory. If you come here, I can cover you too." "What? You're covering me?" Tony's eyes widened in disbelief. "Don't be kidding, okay? I'm Tony Stark. I don't need help from others. Even if something happens, I can handle it myself. Forget about going to New York. I feel that Los Angeles is quite comfortable. At least the number of beauties here is much more than New York, which is not comparable to yours." Hearing this, Chen Luo smiled and said nothing more. What he said just now was an idea that popped up when he had an idea. It doesn't matter whether it is successful or not. Anyway, Tony will move to New York in the end. It's just a matter of time. Then, half an hour passed. While the three were chatting, suddenly, the voice of JRVIS sounded. "Gentlemen, the Bermuda Triangle has arrived." Hearing this, the three of them instantly lifted their spirits and hurriedly looked out the window. The location of the three of them at this moment is on the edge of Bermuda, about 1,000 meters above sea level. Through the window, the three of them could clearly see. Not far from them, a stretch of dark clouds covered the sky, the clouds covered with lightning and thunder, and the sea surface was shrouded in a layer of thick fog, making it impossible to see the contents clearly. But even here, the three of them could faintly hear the howling wind from this area, as well as the lapping of the waves, coupled with the constant roar of thunder. It gave people a feeling of heart palpitations. Seeing the scene in front of them, the three of them were silent for a moment and looked at each other. After a long time, Rode hesitated and said, "Tony, why don't you? I think this adventure is fine. I suddenly found that the party is more fun." Hearing this, Tony, who was already a bit retreating, was relieved. He frowned, pretended to be hesitation for a while, and then sighed heavily. "Hey, I actually wanted to go in and take a look, but seeing how scared Rhodes is, let's forget it." Tony stepped forward, patted Rhodes on the shoulder, and said earnestly, "Rod, you are too timid. Sometimes I really doubt how you became a major at this age. You need to practice more in the future. Look at me and Chen Luo, we are not afraid pass." Tony is right. Come on, Major Rhodes. You have to work harder, Manua Zhao. Chen Luo on the side also nodded in approval, with a look of approval. "Rhodes. Hee. I suddenly changed my mind. Why don't we go in and have a look before we talk about it?" However, when his words fell, Tony seemed not to hear, raised his head and said to the surroundings, "JRVIS, reset the course and send us home." "I see, sir." Immediately afterwards, when they were about to turn around and leave, they didn't notice at all that not far from the three of them, the originally pitch-black clouds were rapidly spreading, and in less than a minute, they completely enveloped the plane where the three of them were on inside. The next moment, thunder and lightning, wind and rain, accompanied by the whistling sound of the wind. The strong airflow instantly blew the plane to this side, shaking violently. The three were completely unprepared, their feet loosened, and they fell to the ground in an instant. Chapter 69. Mare Fake. What's going on? JRVIS, what happened? Tony yelled in panic. "Sir, the plane is suddenly hit by a strong airflow and has deviated from its original track." "What? So where are we now?" "You are now in the Bermuda Triangle." As soon as the words fell, suddenly, accompanied by a violent shaking, the dazzling red lights in the aircraft cabin began to flash continuously, and then, Chao Weixi's intermittent voice sounded. Sir, due to the influence of an unknown magnetic field, the functions of various equipment of the aircraft have been affected, and the communication equipment has failed, making it impossible to communicate with the outside world. Ding, ding, ding. The wings have been damaged due to the impact of the strong airflow, and the damage rate of the fuselage is 30%. The plane is about to crash. Please evacuate as soon as possible. Hearing this, the expressions of Chen Luo and the three of them changed instantly. Damn it! Are we inside the Bermuda Triangle now? Rhodes' originally dark face was faintly pale, and his eyes were full of unconcealable panic. I don't know where the airflow came from, and it just enveloped the plane. It seems that our expedition was not in vain. Chin, when is this 203? You still have the heart to say such things here. Tony clutched the seat beside him with both hands, tried to stabilize his body, and shouted at the two. There is no other way now. Let's parachute out first. Otherwise, if the plane explodes, we will have no hope of surviving. Then what are you waiting for? Where's the parachute? Before the plane explodes completely, we must escape quickly. At this critical juncture, Rhodes' qualities as a soldier finally made him calm down completely, and he began to think about ways to escape. As a member of the Air Force, he is absolutely familiar with parachutes, so if he finds the parachute as soon as possible, with his skills, he also has a certain degree of confidence that the three of them can land safely. Tony also understood that the situation was urgent, but before he could speak, the fuselage shook violently again as if it had been hit again. A moment later, when the fuselage stabilized again, the voice of JRVIS sounded again. Sir, due to the impact of the airflow just now, the fuselage was further damaged. Sorry, just now, all the parachutes stored in the plane have been lost. What? Hearing this, Tony Rhodes' faces turned pale, their eyes could not stop showing panic, and their hearts were full of despair. Damn it, then how do we get out? F***K. If I knew I shouldn't have come here to explore. Tony shouted angrily. If he could travel back in time, he would have to stop his idiot idea. But it is too late to say these things now. As the damage to the fuselage further intensifies, the plane is already falling uncontrollably towards the sea below. At the current speed, it is afraid that it will touch the sea within a minute at most. Falling into the sea from a height of several thousand meters, with his wisdom, he can already imagine what will happen to them at that time. Thinking of the scene where they were about to be smashed to pieces, Tony, who had always been cynical, finally felt the fear of death. Boom! Just when the two were panicking, suddenly, a loud noise came from their ears. Immediately afterwards, before the two of them could react, the cabin door not far away had disappeared. Without the obstruction of the cabin door, the violent airflow from the outside surged madly into the cabin, instantly sweeping Tony and the two into midair, and then along the way, flew out of the cabin door with the air current. Faced with such a scene, their brains completely went blank, and they had no time to think. They just subconsciously waved their hands and let out panicked cries, but they were quickly submerged in the storm. And the moment the two of them were about to be swept away from the cabin by the airflow, at the door of the cabin, Chen Luo stretched out his hand quickly, and then clamped the two of them in his arms, one on the left and the other on the right. Crunch! Under Chen Luo's terrifying power, his feet were firmly stuck in the steel pedals below him, leaving two deep footprints, as if looking for something. Jack. Finally, he seemed to have discovered something, and suddenly said, Tony, Rhodes, stop shouting. What do you see in front of you? Hearing Chen Luo's voice, the two raised their heads subconsciously. When they saw the foggy shadow in front of them, they seemed to have thought of something, and a glimmer of hope suddenly appeared in their eyes. That's an island? 7. However, before the two had time to be happy for a long time, they suddenly thought of their current situation. It is true that there is a small island in front of them, but they don't even have a parachute now, and the plane is about to crash, not to mention the chances of surviving when they jump out of the cabin before the plane crashes and fall into the sea. Even if they managed to survive, they were at least 10 miles away from the small island. Coupled with the turbulent seawater in this sea area, as well as the impact of the storm, the chances of them being able to reach the small island were infinite. Close to zero, in such a desperate situation, even a genius like Tony can't think of the slightest possibility of escape. Thinking of this, the hope that the two people had originally surged suddenly became dim again. Hold me tight, all of you later. I'm about to jump. At this moment, Chen Luo's voice sounded. Looking at the sea surface, which was less than a kilometer away from them at this moment, his face was calmer than ever. Waiting quietly for the plane to fall further, finally, when it reached a height of about 100 meters above the sea surface, Chen Luo's eyes flashed, and he made a move immediately. I'm going to jump. The next moment, Chen Luo moved his foot and kicked back violently. Under the huge amounts of force, the bodies of the three people quickly began to move away from the fuselage, and then quickly fell toward the sea. Holding the two of them in front of his chest, Chen Luo leaned his back against the sea, like a human-shaped cannonball, The distance of 100 meters passed in a flash, just a few seconds, accompanied by a huge amount of explosion. It fell into the sea in an instant minister. With Chen Luo's body as a buffer, the two of Tony did not suffer much impact and successfully landed without parachute protection. Not long after, when Chen Luo led the two of them to the surface of the sea again, feeling the cold sea water around them, the faces of the two of them who were originally panicked were stunned, and it took a long time to react. We survived. Tony murmured something, suddenly seemed to remember something, turned his head suddenly, and looked at Chen Luo with a look of surprise. Chun, how did you do it? Jumping from such a high place, there is nothing wrong with it. Hearing this, Rhodes also reacted, recalling Chen Luo's inhuman performance just now, and he was also surprised in his heart. Didn't I tell you a long time ago? We are of different races, and this little distance has no effect on me at all. Looking at the two, Chen Luo twitched the corners of his mouth and grinned, two sharp fangs gleaming coldly, appearing in front of the two of them. Seeing this, Tony finally came to his senses. What Chen Luo said back then came to his mind, and his face gradually became horrified. He couldn't help shouting, Momf **K, you really are a vampire. Chapter 70. Living on a deserted island. Chen Luo, you bastard, you really didn't joke with us back then? Hearing Tony's shout, Rhodes also reacted, turned his head, and looked at Chen Luo in disbelief. Chen Luo rolled his eyes helplessly, looked at the two and said, Nonsense, if I were just an ordinary person, do you think I could jump from such a height and be safe? The fact was before the two of them. No matter how hard they dared to believe it, they could only accept the fact. It has to be said that a legendary creature like a vampire actually appeared in front of the two of them, and the impact on them was undoubtedly huge amounts of. But before the two of them could say anything more, the next moment, the turbulent waves in an instant, the giant was swallowed into the sea again. But within a few seconds, Chen Luo brought the two of them to the surface of the sea again. Looking at the endless pitch-black sea all around, violent storms and heavy rains were raging in this sea area. The waves were turbulent and tumbling, and the sea surface was filled with thick fog. At this moment, beneath the three of them, there seemed to be a huge, bottomless abyss, which could engulf them at any time. Looking straight ahead, looking at the black shadow looming in the thick fog ahead, Chen Luo knew that if the three of them wanted to survive now, the only way out was the small island in front of them. As long as they can successfully reach the small island, then Chen Luo believes that with Tony's wisdom, he will be able to figure out a way for them to leave this sea area successfully. With this in mind, Chen Luo immediately stopped hesitation, turned to look at the two of them and said, Tony, Rhodes, I'm going to swim to the small island in front of me later. Hold my leg, don't let go. You hear me? The two also knew that with their physical strength, coupled with the impact of the constantly churning waves, they would absolutely not be able to support them to swim to the small island ahead, so they had no objection and immediately nodded in agreement. However, when the two came behind Chen Luo and hugged Chen Luo's legs from left to right, Tony seemed to think of something suddenly, rolled his eyes, and said, By the way, Chen, I suddenly thought of a good idea. Look, if we sit on you, your legs will be free. Wouldn't it be faster to swim? Then we can get to the island faster. What do you think of the idea? Hearing this, Chen Luo's face darkened. He turned his head, looked at this guy with an unkind expression, and said slowly, I don't think so. Also, you bastard, if you dare to think this way about me again, then don't blame me for throwing you down. Seeing Chen Luo's dark face, Tony shrunk his neck subconsciously, smiled mischievously, and hugged Chen Luo's thigh tightly, not daring to make any more moves. Rhodes on the side smiled awkwardly and didn't dare to say a word. Hearing Tony's suggestion just now, he agreed with it at first, but seeing Chen Luo's reaction, well, he suddenly felt that this place is also quite good. Seeing that the two finally calmed down, Chen Luo stared straight ahead, took a deep breath, and finally started to move. With a sudden pounce, his hands began to swing rapidly like two spinning tops. Under the action of Chen Luo's huge force, the seawater was quickly pushed away, and under the huge amounts of force, Chen Luo led Tony and the two behind him, like a black arrow, quickly passing through the sea. Even if there are surging waves in front of him, it can't stop Chen Luo's pace at all. With his terrifying stamina dozens of times compared to ordinary people, he swam for nearly half an hour without any hesitation. Exhausted, after swimming for nearly 10 miles. Suddenly, not far in front of Chen Luo, a huge amount of steel plate was floating on the sea surface, gradually drifting towards Chen Luo's direction. Through the familiar pattern on it, Chen Luo suddenly understood that this steel plate probably fell from the plane carrying them. Looking at the steel plate, Chen Luo suddenly had an idea in his mind. He took the initiative to meet them, and when the two were about to touch, Chen Luo stretched out his hands and gave a strong support. Then, the steel plate stopped in front of Chen Luo instantly. After holding the steel plate firmly, Chen Luo turned to look at the two of them and said, Tony, Rhodes, you climb on this steel plate. I want to take this steel plate to the island together. Huh? Why is that? A trace of doubt flashed in Rhodes' eyes, but Tony reacted quickly. Without saying a word, he immediately strenuously moved forward, swam towards the steel plate, and then climbed up with difficulty. Come on, Rhodes. We will need this steel plate in the future. After all, we have to find a way to get out. If there are not enough materials, even with my genius brain, there is no way to create a tool for leaving. Hearing this, Rhodes finally understood that without hesitation, he immediately climbed onto the steel plate, and then firmly stabilized his figure, controlling himself not to fall into the sea. Afterwards, Chen Luo dragged the huge amounts of steel plate and swam forward with both legs. Because both hands need to control the steel plate, compared to the previous speed, Chen Luo's speed at this moment is more than twice as slow. In addition to the weight originally carried by this huge steel plate, the burden on Chen Luo is also then it got a lot heavier. But fortunately, Chen Luo's strength and physique are far superior to ordinary people, so he can bear it. After swimming for nearly 2 hours, he finally arrived at the destination smoothly. The waves crashed against the rocks in front, making a crashing sound, and as the sea level continued to decrease, finally, Chen Luo gradually felt the solid touch from his feet. 0. Looking at the beach not far away, Tony and the two on the steel plate can't wait to jump down. Stepping on the beach, looking at the dense jungle in front of them, the bodies of the two who escaped from death softened and immediately lay on the ground, panting violently. Holding the steel plate above his head, Chen Luo slowly came to the ground, then put down the steel plate in his hand. His face became much more relaxed. He exhaled lightly and said, "Finally safe." Now that he is already on the ground, Chen Luo can fully display his strength. Compared with the unpredictable ocean, there is no doubt that the ground will be safer. Looking up at the dark night sky, Chen Luo also called out luck in his heart. If it was still daytime, his strength would be weakened by half. By then, would he be able to bring Tony and the others to this place smoothly? On the island, Chen Luo is not sure at all. It seems that the island is still at night, and it is too dangerous to enter the dense forest to explore at this time. I think we should stay here for one night, and we can talk about the rest tomorrow. Regarding this, Tony and the two who had already been exhausted did not refute at all, and immediately agreed. Afterwards, Chen Luo went deep into the ocean again and caught some seafood. After the three of them simply filled their stomachs, they could no longer bear the exhaustion pouring out of their bodies and fell asleep. Definitely, in the face of this completely unfamiliar environment, Chen Luo did not dare to sleep to death completely and kept vigilant at all times. Fortunately, as the night passed, there was no danger here, and the three of them were able to pass through the doors smoothly this night. Chapter 71 Exploration, Skull Island? The next day, with a ray of warm sunshine shining on the beach, feeling the warmth from their bodies, after sleeping soundly for more than 10 hours, the two of Tony finally opened their eyes slowly. "Are you awake?" At this time, Chen Luo's voice came from not far away. Hearing this voice, the two of them were refreshed and woke up instantly. Looking around, Tony lowered his head and sighed deeply. "Damn it, I thought it was a dream before, but I didn't expect it to be real. So we are living on a desert island now? This is really a nightmare." Rhodes' expression on the side was also a little ugly, but it didn't take long for him to quickly accept this fact because of his military qualities. Bracing himself, Rhodes stood up and was about to observe the surrounding environment. At this moment, he seemed to have discovered something. His eyes widened instantly, and he subconsciously let out 580 and exclaimed, "Look, Tony, what is this?" Hearing this, Tony subconsciously looked in the direction he pointed, but when he saw the scene on the sea not far away, his expression froze for an instant. "Are you kidding? There is such an environment?" Within his field of vision, about a few miles away from the island, it was like a clear boundary line. Inside the boundary line, the sun was shining and the sky was blue. Outside the boundary line, the sky was shrouded in pitch-black clouds, with howling winds, lightning and thunder, and violent waves churning, like the end of the world. This was the first time he had seen such a strange scene. Looking at the boundary line in front of him, Chen Luo couldn't help but have an absurd guess. Such a scene, can it be that island? Thinking of this, Chen Luo turned to look at the dense forest behind him, and then said softly, "It's time, Tony, Rhodes, let's go and have a look inside." The two came back to their senses. Since there is no way to leave now, it seems that going to this island to explore has become the only choice. Therefore, neither of them refused, and they nodded in unison. Afterwards, the three of them walked together and walked towards the depths of the dense forest together. In the tall and luxuriant jungle, Chen Luo walked in the front to open the way, Tony stood in the center, and Rhodes followed closely behind the two, looking around with a look of wariness. Beside the few people, there are towering trees with a height of tens of meters, each of which is surrounded by several people. And in this environment, because the sun can't shine, Chen Luo can also display his full strength, which is why he dared to explore this dense forest during the day. Looking up at the big trees around him, Tony couldn't help but exclaim. These trees are at least hundreds of years old, right? It's the first time I've seen them grow to such a height. If you look at it this way, then this island may really have some research value. Hearing this, Chen Luo also looked at the front thoughtfully and said, maybe we are the first people to set foot on this island? It seems that this island has been isolated from the world for a long time. I think there may be ancient creatures from the ancient times living on it, and it may not be certain. According to this, there might really be dinosaurs here. Tony's eyes lit up, and a gleam of anticipation flashed in his heart. If there really are dinosaurs, then the value of this island may be immeasurable. Just as he was feeling emotional, suddenly, Chen Luo's face in front of him changed, and he immediately turned around, pulling Tony to move a few meters away. Just as Tony was wondering, the next moment, a long bamboo pole suddenly fell from the sky and plunged straight into him. In the original standing position. Shit, what is this? Following the bamboo pole, Road looked up slowly, but when he saw the true face of the bamboo pole, his face changed drastically immediately, and he couldn't help but roared. Hearing this, Tony and Chen Luo also looked up at the same time, only to see a giant yellowish-brown creature more than 10 meters long along the bamboo pole nearly 100 meters up. This creature is slender, and its whole body is covered by a layer of hard yellow-brown armor. Its 8 limbs, which are about 20 meters long, are like extremely sharp spears, covering a range of 100 meters around. A limb fell, and some creatures that couldn't dodge were pierced on the spot, and then sent into the mouth of the top creature. And if Chen Luo hadn't discovered the opponent's attack in advance and pulled Tony to dodge it, I'm afraid it would be Tony himself who was treated as food at this time. Damn it, what kind of creature is this? How can it grow so big? Tony stared blankly at the figure with huge amounts of above his head, his face full of fear. It looks like a stick insect magnified many times. Rhodes said uncertainly, and Chen Luo at the side, after seeing this creature, immediately confirmed a certain conjecture in his heart, and his originally relaxed face gradually became dignified. Is this Skull Island? Hearing this, Tony turned his head instantly, looked straight at Chen Luo and asked, Chen, do you know the situation on this island? It's not very clear. Chen Luo also simply explained a few words. I just accidentally read it in an expedition notebook, saying that there is a mysterious island in the Bermuda area, and it is said that there are ancient creatures living in it. So far, I have always thought it was just a legend, but I didn't expect it to be true. Ancient creatures? Tony subconsciously turned his head to look at the sky, and murmured with a flash of insight in his eyes. This is the only possibility. It is said that in ancient times, the concentration of oxygen on this planet was very high, so the creatures born were huge in size. Perhaps this island was not affected by the unique environment of Bermuda. Environmental impact, maintaining the most primitive style of ancient times. Looking at it this way, the creature in front of us is probably the ancestor of the stick insect. Speaking of this, a flash of fire suddenly flashed in Tony's eyes. He turned to look at Chen Luo and said solemnly, Chen, the value of this island is really too great. If we can escape from here successfully, we will the two join forces to take the ownership of this island together. What do you think of 0.8? Chen Luo has no objection to this, although he knows that the island is of great value. But to maximize its value, it must be developed without a genius like Tony. In addition, with his own strength, he doesn't have the confidence to monopolize this island. Considering this situation, Tony is indeed the most suitable candidate for him. Hearing the conversation between the two, Rhodes on the side was tactful and didn't ask any more questions. After all, standing behind him was the military, which was different from Chen Luo's. Once they got involved, they would undoubtedly fall into a passive situation. With this in mind, not only would Rhodes not tell the military about this, but he would also try his best to cover it up for the two of them. And this is the only thing he can do for the two of them as a friend. Chapter 72 Out of the Forest, Danger is Approaching. Then, under the leadership of Chen Luo, the three walked carefully through the dense forest and walked forward. And in the process, the three of them were eye-opening, as if to verify Tony's guess before. In this dense forest, all kinds of ancient creatures appeared in front of the three of them, and Tony was even more amazed when he saw it. An ancient giant mosquito with the file size of a washbasin. Its long and sharp mouthparts are like a long iron pipe, which can easily penetrate into the living body. It looks very ferocious. In addition, the three of them also saw a giant centipede that can reach tens of meters in length, snaking and circling in the forest. And there was even a file-sized ants walking through the dense forest in groups, with a black carapace glowing. A layer of metallic luster, like a steel army, mighty and mighty. No creature dares to step forward to stop it. The three of them stopped and stopped along the way, and saw many ancient species that only existed in books. Looking at these creatures of different shapes and sizes, the three of them were amazed, and couldn't help but become more cautious. After all, The danger of these creatures is not just for fun. Although Chen Luo can fully display his strength in this dense forest, he is not omnipotent. Animals on land may be fine, but if you face those creatures that can fly, he is also helpless. If the two of Tony were captured by the flight creature, the possibility of catching up would become very small, especially once the opponent flies out of this dense forest. Without the shade of the trees, his physical fitness will be greatly reduced, and even the Iron Man and super speed regeneration will be suppressed. In this way, even self-protection will become a problem, let alone saving lives. It was precisely because of such a reason that, after several hours, when the three of them finally passed through the dense forest and were about to reach the edge of the dense forest, Chen Luo suddenly stopped. What's the matter? Chun, aren't we going to the exit soon? Seeing Chen Luo's movements, the two of Tony behind him stopped at the same time, looking at him with some doubts. I can't go any further. If I get out of this dense forest, I'm afraid I won't be able to protect you. Looking at the large expanse of sunlight pouring in from the edge of the dense forest, Chen Luo frowned, with a helpless expression on his face. I have a hunch that the outside world may be more dangerous than we imagined. After a pause, Chen Luo looked at the two seriously and suggested, maybe we can wait until night to go out. After all, night is our time. At home, I will be able to play stronger at that time than now, so I will be more confident. No way, after all, Chen Luo would not casually reveal his weaknesses to others, so he could only temporarily make up such a reason to explain to the two of them. So, therefore, after listening to Chen Luo's words, the two agreed one after another. Fortunately, it was almost night, so the three of them didn't have to wait long. As the sun set and the sun dissipated, the three of them embarked on the journey again. Under the leadership of Chen Luo, the three of them walked slowly towards the edge of the dense forest without any accidents. When the three of them stepped out of the dense forest one after another, what appeared in front of them was a canyon with huge amounts of it. Under the moonlight, Tony and Tony could barely see the scene in front of them. Two huge amounts of mountain peaks stood on both sides, with a gap of hundreds of meters in the middle, and they couldn't see the end at a glance. And about 1 kilometer away from the front of the three, a waterfall poured down from the mountain peak on the side and fell into the huge amounts of water pool below, stirring up countless waves, and the momentum was astonishing. Relying on far superior eyesight, Chen Luo was able to clearly see that around the huge amounts of water pool, all kinds of ancient creatures were drinking water around the edge, and these creatures were vigilant even when drinking water. It is full of sexuality, as if it is guarding against natural enemies. As soon as there is any trouble, it will immediately turn around and flee. After hearing the sound of running water not far away, the two of Tony, who hadn't replenished water for nearly a day, couldn't hold back immediately and whispered, Chen, we must also replenish water. Otherwise, I'm afraid we won't last long. Chen Luo is also very clear about this point, nodded immediately, and then said, then I'll go get some water. It's a bit dangerous over there, so don't follow. Find a place to hide. The two immediately agreed. Then after Chen Luo left, Tony seemed to suddenly remember something, and his face became a little dignified. By the way, Rhodes, maybe we need to find a place to start a fire first. What? Are you crazy, Tony? Rhodes stared wide-eyed, looking at him in disbelief. Don't you know what this place is? Living in this place, you are not afraid of other creatures coming over? No way. Tony spread his hands and explained. The environment here is close to ancient times, and we don't know if there are any unknown microorganisms in the water source. If you drink it directly, there may be some unknown danger. So I think it's best to boil the water for our safety. This reason from Tony immediately made Rhodes speechless. After thinking about it, he finally gritted his teeth and agreed. Looking around for a while, Rhodes' eyes suddenly lit up, and he looked at a corner not far away. Surrounded by boulders on three sides, there is just a space in the middle that can accommodate several people, and the only entrance is less than 1 meter away, which can be a good defense against the huge amounts of creatures outside. No matter from the concealment or the safety of 337 sexually speaking, it is a top choice. Pointing at the naturally formed cave, Rhodes whispered, then let's go over there. It's well concealed, and if you light a fire there, it shouldn't attract the attention of other creatures. Looking in the direction that Rhodes pointed, Tony also had a happy face when he saw the natural cave, and immediately agreed. Afterwards, the division of labor between the two was clear. Tony returned to the edge of the dense forest and found some tree branches as raw materials for starting a fire, while Rhodes was in charge of finding tools for starting a fire. A moment later, when the two came to the cave, they put the collected wood together, and then Rhodes held 2 smooth pebbles in his hand, and with the violent collision, sparks sputtered out, falling into the dead leaves below. Immediately afterwards, under the nervous gaze of the two, finally, wisps of white smoke slowly rose from the dead leaves. Seeing this scene, both of them showed excitement on their faces. After a while, a small fire was set up in front of the two of them. Looking at the warm and bright flames in front of them, and feeling the long-lost warmth, the two of them immediately felt a lot more relaxed. However, at this time, the two of them didn't notice at all. Along with the flame rising, the heat generated in this cave also attracted the attention of a certain creature. Chapter 73 Skeleton Monitor Lizard. Chen Luo, save me. It is 100 meters away from this cave. In a huge, bottomless pit, accompanied by the sound of crawling. A moment later, a huge creature about 7 or 8 meters in length rushed out of the hole. This creature is like a monitor lizard that has been magnified hundreds of times. Its whole body is covered with gray-black skin. There are sharp claws on the ends of its limbs, and there is a faint layer of metallic luster on it. It can easily penetrate rocks, and it is because of the sharp claws under its feet that it can freely walk through the cliffs of the mountains, which is extremely flexible. The most notable thing is that the head of this creature is covered by a layer of white bone mask, which looks like a skeleton, which is daunting. This kind of creature is exactly the terrifying creature that is King Kong's old enemy, the skeleton monitor lizard. As the well-deserved overlord creature on this island, the skeleton monitor lizard not only has extremely strong flexibility and explosive power, but also has a super strong bite force. It can be said that as long as they become adults, there is no other creature except King Kong, their opponents. And more importantly, the skeleton monitor lizard is also a social creature. They usually live deep underground. When they need to hunt, they go out in groups to hunt. It's okay if you meet 2 or 3, but if you meet 5, if the number is more than that, even an overlord like King Kong will have to stay away. Unfortunately, it was such a terrifying creature that had already quietly followed them without Tony and the two of them realizing it. Because of living underground all year round, the eyesight of the skeleton monitor lizards has been severely degraded, but correspondingly, they have also evolved another perception method, thermal energy perception. It is precisely because of this perception method that they are extremely sensitive to heat. Therefore, when Tony and the two lit a fire, they immediately attracted the attention of the skeleton monitor lizard. Although its body length has reached about 7 or 8 meters, but such a body is still young in this group, and it is far from the age to go out to hunt. But perhaps because it has no parents to take care of it, it has been underground for several days after not eating, it finally couldn't stand it anymore and crawled out of the ground on its own initiative. The cold and cruel eyes turned to the cave where the two were. The skeleton monitor slowly crawled forward, like a natural hunter, without causing the slightest movement, and gradually approached the entrance of the cave. As a shadow gradually came in, covering the light of the flame, the two finally became alert, turned their heads subconsciously, and looked out of the cave. However, just looking at it like this, the hairs of the two stood on end. Their scalps felt a little numb. They stood up subconsciously and quickly moved towards the stone wall behind them. Shit, what the hell is this? Looking at the huge and hideous figure that poked its head into the cave and struggled to get in, the eyes of the two couldn't help but be filled with panic. Because of Chen Luo's protection during the day, the two of them haven't encountered any danger, but the situation is different now. Without Chen Luo's side, it's the first time for them to face this terrifying creature. Looking at the hideous skull mask that was less than 2 meters away from them, the two of them were once again shrouded in the shadow of death. At this critical juncture, the two no longer cared about hiding and started calling for help loudly without even thinking about it. Help, Chen. Come back soon. Chen, if you don't come back, we will be eaten by this damn monster. Chen Luo, help me. Seeing the monster in front of them keep opening its mouth and roaring, the two couldn't help feeling cold all over their bodies and subconsciously wanted to escape. But at this moment the only exit was tightly blocked by this monster, and there was no escape at all. Space. Just when the two were extremely desperate, the next moment, the roar of the monster suddenly stopped, and then, under the shocked gaze of the two, the monster was quickly pulled out of the hole and disappeared in front of the two. Seeing this scene, the two people's cries for help stopped instantly, and at the same time they immediately reacted, realizing something, and came to the entrance of the cave to check. Sure enough, on the way back, Chen Luo was attracted by the cries of the two for help. As soon as he came to the entrance of the cave, he found a skeleton monitor lizard in front of the cave. Knowing that the two were in danger, Chen Luo went to the cave immediately. Rescue ahead. Dragging the monitor lizard's slender tail, the muscles all over his body tightened, and he exerted his strength suddenly. Under his enormous strength dozens of times that of ordinary people, this young skeleton monitor lizard had no room to resist at all, and was instantly dragged out by Chen Luo and thrown aside. Chen Luo, who knew the other party's habits, did not dare to let the other party go. If the other party brought more skeleton monitor lizards here, they would be really in danger. As soon as he thought of this, Chen Luo suddenly had a killing intent in his heart. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Chen Luo moved his feet and disappeared instantly. The next moment, when Chen Luo appeared again, he landed on the opponent's back, aimed at the opponent's neck, and threw out a punch with all his strength. Roar! Accompanied by the monitor lizard roaring with huge amounts of, under Chen Luo's full force, a huge amount of blood hole exploded in the opponent's neck instantly. Blood continued to flow out of the blood hole, and the severe pain instantly spread throughout the monitor lizard's body. Stimulated by the pain, the monitor lizard became more and more crazy, jumping and shaking its head constantly, as if trying to throw Chen Luo off its body. But its performance like this was completely painless to Chen Luo. The sharp nails of both hands stretched out instantly, piercing deeply into the opponent's body and firmly attached to it, without any sign of being thrown off. At the same time, Chen Luo kept moving. One hand fixed his body, and the other hand kept waving, throwing towards the opponent's wound. Punch after punch, with each punch, the wound on the opponent's neck became bigger and bigger, and the speed of blood flow continued to accelerate. With the continuous loss of blood in the body, the monitor lizard finally lost its previous vitality, and the powerless he collapsed on the ground, gradually losing his breath. Well done. After confirming that the other party was completely dead, Chen Luo finally felt relieved, jumped off the other party's body, took a large piece of flesh and blood from the other party's body, and then walked towards the cave where Tony and the two were. Coming into the cave, Chen Luo looked at the two people whose faces were still pale, and said with some amusement, I said, aren't you all scared stupid? Hearing this, the two couldn't help rolling their eyes immediately. Do you think we are all like you? Please, we are just ordinary people. Can we not be afraid when we encounter such monsters? That's true. Chen Luo nodded in agreement, then changed the topic and said, then, if I transform you into vampires, what do you think? Hearing this, the two of them froze in place for an instant. Chapter 74 The Way to Escape, Self-Reliance. After a long while, the two finally came to their senses, looked at Chen Luo uncertainly, and said, Are you serious? If you want. Chen Luo said with a smile. Hearing Chen Luo's answer, and recalling Chen Luo's previous performance, the two of them had a look of excitement in their eyes, but after that, they didn't know what they thought of, and finally shook their heads slowly and refused. This tempting proposition. Forget it. I think it's good to be an ordinary human being. Tony shrugged, but his face was extremely confident. And even if I am an ordinary person, with my genius-like brain, it may not be possible in the future. I will lose to you, Chen. I never doubted that. Chen Luo nodded slightly, his face full of approval. I'm quite interested, but you all know who I am. If I become a vampire, I will definitely be questioned by the people above. I don't want to cause such trouble. But if one day I don't want to work there, maybe I will consider this proposal at that time. Rhodes also stated his reasons, and Chen Luo also expressed his understanding. Then the three of them roasted the piece of flesh brought by Chen Luo on the fire. After eating and drinking enough, seeing that the two had recovered most of their physical strength, Chen Luo spoke again, talking about what he had just said. What I learned when fetching water 590. What? Chen, you mean you just saw a plane wreckage? Tony stood up suddenly, looked at Chen Luo with bright eyes and asked. That's right. Chen Luo nodded, and said thoughtfully in his eyes. Besides, it seems that the wreckage has been there for some years, and I think it must have been affected by the storm, so it crashed on this place. Island. These are not important. Tony didn't want to care about the cause of the plane crash, and now he was more concerned about whether he could find what he needed on the wreckage of the plane. After all, no matter how talented he is, without the corresponding tools and materials, he has nowhere to start. Therefore, after hearing the news from Chen Luo, he will appear so urgent. As long as he can find something in this wreckage, then his ability will undoubtedly play its due role. Where's the wreckage? Take me there. I'll find out if there's anything useful inside. Seeing Tony's eager face, Chen Luo immediately nodded in agreement without any hesitation. Then, under the leadership of Chen Luo, the three of them walked all the way, taking advantage of the cover of the night, Jedge. And after walking for about an hour, Chen Luo finally stopped. It's here. Chen Luo stepped forward, pointed to the huge figure not far away that had already been entwined by vines, and then turned to look at Tony. It's up to you, Tony. Tony nodded solemnly, then came to the front of the fuselage, reached out and gently stroked the wreckage in front of him. A glint of hope flashed in his eyes. Soon, half an hour passed. Just as Chen Luo and Rhodes were guarding around, suddenly, Tony's voice full of excitement came. Great! The plane's engine is still there. Excitedly, Tony came to Chen Luo and asked Chen Luo to help him disassemble the engine on the plane. Then he went to the console, disassembled some instruments with different shapes, and then greeted him and planned to leave. Is it enough to bring these things? Rhodes asked curiously. This is the only thing that can be used here. Tony nodded and replied. But as long as we have this engine, our trip will be worthwhile. Looking at the rust-stained engine beside him, Tony showed a sincere smile on his face. After some thinking, Tony finally decided on a way for the three of them to leave the island, that is to build another plane and fly out of the sea. But because of the unique environment in this sea area, if the plane's speed is not fast enough, it may be involved in the surging storm at any time and end up crashing. Therefore, after his calculations, in order for the plane to pass through this sea area as far as possible, The speed of the plane must reach at least Mach 2 to do so. And to achieve such a speed, a powerful enough the engine is essential. Although the engine that has been dismantled from the wreckage of the plane is quite old now, and some of its parts are even aging, this is not a problem for Tony at all. Able to meet your own requirements. Now that the most important parts have been obtained, what remains is to collect a large amount of steel to make the fuselage. The previous wreckage was too damaged and the steel could no longer be used, so it could only be collected elsewhere. Regarding this point, after seeing the wreckage of the plane that crashed on the island, Tony also had a glimmer of hope in his heart. Since the plane crash can be found here, there may be other wreckage left in other places on the island. Uncertain, if he really can't find it, then he can only try to find or to make steel by himself. But it will undoubtedly take more time to do so, and he will not try that method unless it is absolutely necessary. Although the road ahead is still a bit bumpy, but anyway, at least there is a little hope. After realizing that he might leave the island, Tony instantly became full of energy and his brain began to work rapidly. Soon, he had a new idea. When the three returned to the cave again, Tony immediately said to the two, "Next, I plan to open up and expand this cave. In addition to being used for rest, I also plan to expand a workshop. In addition to modifying the engine, I also want to make some weapons to deal with those monsters. So it can be expected that we will probably stay here for quite a long time in the future. However, in order to successfully produce what I want, I still need a lot of materials. So regarding the collection of materials, Chen, I will trouble you." Chen Luo had no objection to this, and nodded immediately. "What about me?" Seeing this, Rhodes asked unwillingly. "Rod, you are responsible for guarding outside. Oh, and if I need it, you can also come down and help me do chores," Tony said with a relaxed face. "What?" Rhodes complained with some displeasure. "You asked me, a majestic major, to watch the door for you, and also work part-time as a miscellaneous? Are you underestimating me?" "Huh? Then you mean, you want to change with Chen?" Rhodes' face froze, and he immediately said righteously, "I suddenly found that the job of guarding the door is quite suitable for me. There is no need to change it." Hee hee. Chapter 75 Tony's Performance Moment. Now that it has been decided to station here temporarily, it is time to get back the steel plate that was placed on the beach. Then, taking advantage of the darkness, Chen Luo walked through the dense forest behind him alone. Under his full speed running, it took less than an hour to drag huge amounts of steel plates back to the original place. Immediately afterwards, because of Chen Luo, a strong and enduring perfect labor force, Tony also unceremoniously entrusted him with the task of digging the cave, and Chen Luo had no choice but to accept it. Fortunately, Chen Luo possesses the strength of several tons. With just one punch, a big hole explodes in the stone wall in front of him. Relying on the passivity of the steel body, there is no need to worry about the risk of injury. As Chen Luo keeps moving forward with punches, the space in front of him is getting bigger and bigger. Relying on such a simple and direct excavation method, Chen Luo successfully expanded a huge space of about 200 square meters in about 2 hours. The space is divided into two places, one for rest and the other for his Tony's workplace. Looking at the fruits of Chen Luo's labor, the two couldn't help but be amazed. "Chen, I can swear. If you go to work as a construction worker, I'm afraid everyone else will lose their jobs." Facing Tony's ridicule, Chen Luo couldn't help but rolled his eyes and said, "I'm really regretting it now. If I transform you all into vampires, won't I be required to do the hard work?" Hearing this, Tony's smile faltered, and then he pretended not to hear it, and changed the subject naturally. "By the way, Chen, don't bother you to help me deal with it. I need to do some madness first." Chen Luo. For some reason, he suddenly had a premonition that he might have to wear this tool man for quite a while. Although he was cursing and cursing, but facing Tony's request, Chen Luo still completed. Time passed by, and before he knew it, the sky was getting brighter. And after working all night, the results are very gratifying. At least the various tools Tony needs are finally successfully built with the help of Chen Luo, a toolman. In addition to the tools, Chen Luo and Rod are even more excited about the fact that Tony did not know what changes Tony made to the engine removed from the wreckage of the plane. Now it can act as a generator, and Tony in the overnight rush. This underground base has been covered by bright lights at this moment. With the full cooperation of Chen Luo, Tony's ability has been brought into full play. In just one night, the three of them have entered the electrical age by leaps and bounds. Now in this base, we can faintly see the modern society some shadows. Looking at the changes here, Chen Luo was also full of admiration for Tony's ability, and at the same time, he was full of confidence that they could successfully escape from the island. And Tony didn't let him down. In the following 2 days, as the materials brought by Chen Luo were gradually consumed, Tony also transformed these materials into weapons one by one, and placed them in front of Chen Luo. This is individual bazooka? Looking at the things on the ground, Rhodes subconsciously opened his eyes wide. Looking over one by one, his eyes became brighter and brighter. Submachine guns, grenades, Good guys, even mortars? Pick it up and look at it carefully for a moment. As a soldier, Rhodes caressed the gun in his hand a little fondly and looked at the gun with excitement in his eyes. Tony said, "Can I take these out and try them out? Let me see how powerful they are. If they are really the same as the original version, we won't be powerless to fight back against the previous creatures." Facing Rhodes' inquiry, Tony shrugged, shook his head, and said, "Not yet. Although these weapons have been produced, there is still a lack of corresponding ammunition. Regarding gunpowder, corresponding raw materials are also needed to make them, and I don't have them yet." After saying this, Tony then turned his head to look in Chen Luo's direction and said seriously, "So, regarding the matter of finding raw materials, I'll leave it to you." Rubbing the center of his brows with a slight headache, Chen Luo said helplessly, "That's the only way to go." Because Chen Luo will go out to look for raw materials for making airplanes in the future, it is absolutely necessary for Tony to have a certain amount of self-protection after he leaves. Therefore, Tony will take the lead in starting his old business. After the weapons are all made, then Rhodes as a soldier will be useful. I believe that relying on the weapons in his hands, as long as he is not particularly unlucky to meet an overlord like King Kong or an adult skeleton monitor lizard, he should be fine. What danger? Ask for flowers. So, after getting the style of relevant raw materials and the generation environment from Tony, Chen Luo embarked on a journey of searching again. Then, nearly another week passed. During this period of time, relying on his own extraordinary speed, Chen Luo also successfully found the raw materials needed to make gunpowder after searching the entire area of 100 miles. After handing them over to Tony, after some careful configuration by him, the ammunition was finally successfully produced. Accompanied by a burst of intense gunshots, when the gunshots ended, Rhodes picked up the submachine gun, blew the white smoke from the muzzle, and then walked to the stone wall in front of him. Looking at the pitted stone wall in front of him, Rhodes couldn't help showing his eyes the color of wonder. 0. This power seems to be stronger than the original version. That's definitely. Behind Rhodes, Tony said confidently, "In order to deal with the creatures on this island, I deliberately changed the ratio of gunpowder to make the explosion more powerful. In this way, not only the guns, grenades, or individual bazookas in your hand are all more powerful than the original ones. With such a weapon in hand, if we encounter the skeleton monster from before again, we will definitely be able to deal with it." Seeing the confident faces of the two, Chen Luo thought for a while, but couldn't help but reminded, "I'm sorry, the skeleton monitor lizard you met before seems to be just a juvenile. If it grows to an adult size, it will be more than 20 meters long. I was looking for materials before. I have encountered one in my life, and it is not an easy task to deal with it." Immediately afterwards, Chen Luo told the two of the information he knew about the skeleton monitor lizard. "Tony, Rod, Shed, so you're saying that thing is still a pack creature? And as long as they're adults, each of them can hunt T-Rex alone. Isn't that a joke?" The two of them stared wide-eyed and looked at Chen Luo in disbelief. Chen Luo spread his hands and did not speak, but his actions already explained everything. Seeing this, the two couldn't help but gasped.